He said it in front of everyone, not in private, not in a quiet room where the words could dissolve before they reached her chest. He said it standing at the head of a long table surrounded by men who controlled half of Seoul's underground, men who respected no one. And he said it loud enough that every single person in that room heard it. I never wanted her. Seo Min-kyu, the chairman, had smiled when he asked the question. A thin, patient smile, the kind that belonged on a man who had already counted his cards before sitting down at the table. He looked directly at Amara. This woman who had spent the last 3 months sleeping under a roof that wasn't hers, eating meals cooked in a kitchen that didn't know her name, learning the weight of a family that was never supposed to be hers. And he asked Jae-hyun in front of everyone, "Tell me honestly, what is she to you?" The room held its breath. Amara held hers. And Kang Jae-hyun, the man they called the Ghost King, the man who had laughed with her at 2 in the morning over burnt rice and bad jokes, the man who had once pressed his forehead against hers and said nothing because silence between them had started to mean something. That man looked at her for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked away. She is nothing. I never wanted her. She didn't cry. That's the part nobody expected. She simply stood up, straightened her jacket, and walked out of the room like she had somewhere better to be. She didn't, but she walked like she did. And that night, she was gone. Sick. If you have ever loved someone who chose fear over you, subscribe to this channel, hit that like button. Drop your city and country in the comments right now because I need to know how far this story has traveled. And stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will change how you think about second chances, about silence, and about the kind of love that ruins you before it saves you. The subway platform at Mapo Station on a Tuesday evening is not where people expect their lives to change. It's loud and fluorescent and smells like instant noodles from the convenience store near the exit turnstiles. The floors are always slightly sticky near the benches. Pigeons that have no business being underground somehow find their way in. It is ordinary in every direction. Amara Bennett had been in Seoul for 8 months by then, and she had learned to navigate the subway system the same way she'd learned everything else about this city. Slowly, stubbornly, by making the wrong choices first and correcting them later. She was 26. She was studying international business at a private university on a scholarship that covered tuition and almost nothing else. She owned 3 pairs of shoes, 2 of which hurt her feet. She sent money home to Nairobi every month, a little less than she could afford, because her brother Kofi's medication costs kept climbing, and she had stopped pretending the numbers would stabilize on their own. She was tired that evening, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and doesn't leave no matter how much coffee you drink. She had just come from a 4-hour study session where her group project partner had spent 3 of those hours explaining, in careful English, why Amara's market analysis was too ambitious to be taken seriously. She had listened. She had not argued. She had taken the train home with her folder pressed against her chest and her earphones in, not playing anything, just wearing them so no one would try to talk to her. She almost missed it. The old woman was sitting on a bench near the far end of the platform, and the way she sat, rigid, one hand pressed flat against her sternum, the other gripping the bench edge, was the kind of stillness that doesn't belong on a person who's just tired. Amara saw it from 30 feet away and felt something pull in her stomach before her brain had time to process what she was looking at. She crossed the platform in 12 steps. The woman's face was the color of old paper. Her lips were pressed together in the way people press them when they are trying not to make a sound that would frighten someone. She looked up when Amara crouched in front of her, and her eyes, dark, sharp, still very much present, flickered with something between relief and embarrassment. "Ani," the woman said, shaking her head slightly. No. Like Amara was about to offer help she hadn't earned the right to accept. "Stay still," Amara said in Korean. Bad Korean, accented and grammatically rocky, but the words were right. "I'm calling someone." "My phone," the woman started. "I have mine." What happened over the next 20 minutes was not dramatic in the way movies make emergencies look dramatic. It was clumsy and urgent and slightly chaotic. Amara called emergency services and fumbled through describing the station location. A transit worker appeared from somewhere and radioed ahead. 2 other commuters stopped, took one look at the situation, and immediately started offering things. A bottle of water, a folded jacket, a hand on the old woman's shoulder. The old woman, for her part, sat through all of it with a kind of contained dignity that suggested she was not accustomed to being fussed over and was tolerating it only because her chest wouldn't let her argue. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. They asked questions. Amara answered the ones she could. When they eased the woman onto a stretcher, the old woman reached out and grabbed Amara's wrist. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "Your name," she said in Korean. "Amara." The woman held her gaze for a moment. "I will not forget." Amara assumed that was the end of it. She stood on the platform after the stretcher was wheeled away, alone us again, her folder still clutched against her chest. The train she had been waiting for came and went. She took the next one. She went home to her small rented room in Mapogu, made instant noodles, and fell asleep at the table with her economics textbook open in front of her. She did not think about the old woman again until 9 days later, when a black car appeared outside her university building. The man who stepped out of the car was not Jae-hyun. He was a security detail named Park, broad-shouldered and expressionless, who introduced himself in Korean, so formal it felt like reading a legal document. He handed Amara a card. On it was an address and a time written in ink, tomorrow, 7 in the evening, and nothing else. "Who is this from?" Amara asked. "Madam Kong requests your presence," Park said. "For dinner." Amara looked at the card. She looked at Park. She looked back at the card. "I don't know any Madam Kong," she said. "You helped her at Mapo Station," Park said. "She has not forgotten." Amara went home and spent an hour convincing herself not to go. She had too much studying. She didn't know these people. Getting into black cars with men who appeared outside your school was exactly the kind of decision she had always been careful enough to avoid. She went. The house, she would learn later to call it a compound, was in a part of northern Seoul that didn't look like the rest of the city. Old walls, tall trees, silence of a different quality than urban silence, denser, more deliberate, the kind of quiet that costs money to maintain. Inside, Madeline Kong was sitting up in a chair by a window, wrapped in a blanket that probably cost more than Amara's monthly rent, and looking exactly as sharp and composed as she had in the paramedic's hands, minus the gray pallor, which had been replaced by something close to warmth. "Sit," she said when Amara entered the room. Amara sat. Dinner arrived on trays carried by people who moved with the practiced invisibility of long-employed staff. The food was expensive and beautifully presented, and Amara ate carefully because she hadn't had a real meal since the previous weekend, and she was not going to let it show. They talked. Madeline asked questions about Kenya, about Amara's studies, about what she hoped to do with an international business degree, about her family. And she listened the way people only listen when they're genuinely interested, not politely tolerating. Amara answered. She was honest when she didn't mean to be. There was something about the old woman that made performance seem like too much effort. It was near the end of the meal, when a staff member came to clear the plates, that the door at the far end of the room opened. Amara knew who he was before anyone said his name. It wasn't the way he looked, though he was not someone you failed to notice. Tall, lean, the kind of posture that comes not from good posture habits, but from years of being the person other people made space for. It was the way the room adjusted when he walked in. Something subtle. The staff moved slightly differently. Madeline's expression changed by 1 degree. Even the quality of the light in the room seemed to shift, though that made no sense. He stopped when he saw Amara. She saw the recognition cross his face, not of her specifically, but of the situation. His grandmother. A stranger at the dinner table. An unannounced meeting. His expression didn't rearrange itself into anything friendly. "Halmione," he said. "Grandmother." His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that has learned to not betray anything. "You didn't mention a guest." "I didn't think you would come home for dinner," Madeline said, with the serenity of a woman who had been planning this for a week. "This is Amara. She is the young woman from the subway station." Something shifted behind his eyes, just barely. "Kang Jae-hyun," he said, looking at Amara. Not a greeting exactly, more like a statement of fact. "I know," Amara said. That was apparently not the response he expected. His expression didn't change, but something in the stillness of his face changed. A very slight recalibration. "You know," he repeated. "Your grandmother mentioned your name 3 times during dinner," Amara said. "I can do basic math." Madeline made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Chae-hyun sat down at the table without being asked. It was his house, after all, and accepted the tea that materialized in front of him. He didn't look at Amara again. He talked to his grandmother about something related to a business matter that Amara didn't catch the details of, and she had the distinct impression that this was deliberate, that he was performing normalcy in a way designed to make her feel invisible. She found it more annoying than intimidating. Before she left, Madeline held both of Amara's hands in hers and told her she was welcome back any time. Amara said thank you and meant it. Jae-hyun was standing near the entrance when she passed through the hall toward the door. He wasn't looking at her. He was reading something on his phone. But the position felt intentional, the way it feels when someone has placed themselves in a space without quite being willing to admit why. You saved her life, he said, without looking up. I called 119, Amara said. Anyone would have done that. They didn't, he said. The platform was full. You were the one who noticed. She stopped walking. Is that your version of thank you? She asked. He finally looked up from the phone. His eyes were dark and level and gave nothing away except that he was paying more attention than he appeared to be. Yes, he said. It's not very good, she said. And she walked out. She spent the entire train ride home telling herself she wasn't going to think about Kang Jae-hyun again. She thought about him the entire train ride home. What's? Madeline called 3 days later, personally, which Amara found mildly alarming because she had not given the old woman her number. She chose not to ask how she got it. The answer would likely not be simple. The invitation this time was more specific. A family gathering, small, Madeline said, just a few people, at the compound the following Saturday. She used the word gathering with the careful ease of someone who knows perfectly well that the thing she is describing is significantly more than what the word implies. Amara said she had studying to do. Madeline waited. Amara said she would come for 2 hours. The gathering was not small. There were 30-some people in the main hall of the compound, many of them dressed in the kind of clothes that implied they had staff who ironed their clothes. There were business associates and family members, and people whose relationship to the Kang family was deliberately ambiguous. There was food on long tables and drinks that were too good to be poured carelessly. There was a controlled energy to the room, the way expensive parties always have, everything arranged and curated and performing ease rather than actually being at ease. Amara arrived in a green dress she had owned for 2 years, which had held up beautifully despite its price, and a pair of earrings from her mother that were the most expensive things she owned. She found Madeline in 20 seconds. The old woman lit up when she saw her. Jae-hyun found her 11 minutes later. You came, he said. I said I would, she said. People say things, he said. I don't, she said. He stood beside her for a moment, both of them facing the room. 2 of his business associates came over and began a conversation with him about a shipping contract, and Amara found herself half listening, and then listening more deliberately, and then, before she could stop herself, speaking. That corridor route has a 23% higher tariff burden than the southern alternative, she said. If you're trying to move volume without eating into margin, the southern route makes more structural sense, especially if you're building toward African market access. East African ports are undercapitalized but stable, and the regulatory climate has shifted significantly in the last 18 months. The 2 associates looked at her. Jae-hyun looked at her. There was a silence. That's my assessment, she said. I'm studying this. So, she picked up her drink. For what it's worth. One of the associates cleared his throat and began asking her a follow-up question. Then another. The conversation pulled her in a direction she hadn't intended to go, and she went anyway, because she knew what she was talking about, and she was tired of pretending to know less than she did in rooms where people assumed she knew nothing. Jae-hyun did not leave. He stood at the edge of the conversation and listened to her dismantle the shipping contract argument with the focused attention of someone recalibrating what they thought they knew. Later, when the associates had drifted away, he said, Where did you study? Nairobi University for 2 years, Seoul for 8 months, she said. And I read, a lot, because I can't afford to not know things. He was quiet for a moment. You said African markets. You have a specific interest. I have a specific plan, she said. Korean manufacturing paired with East African distribution infrastructure. The fundamentals work. The relationships are underdeveloped. A lot of people have plans, he said. A lot of people's plans don't account for what actually moves money on the ground, she said. Mine does. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read, which she suspected was the only expression he was comfortable wearing. You should come to a meeting, he said. Next week. We have investors discussing expansion. I'm a student, she said. I don't belong in your meetings. You just corrected 2 of my senior advisors in front of their colleagues, he said. You belong wherever you decide to be. It was the closest thing to a compliment she had heard from him. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. She went to the meeting. The attacks started 6 weeks later. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind, which are always more frightening. The first was a note left in the lobby of her university building, printed on plain paper, folded twice. "You don't belong here. Go home before you embarrass yourself." She folded it again and put it in her bag. She told no one. The second was a package delivered to the compound, because by then she was visiting the compound regularly, because Madeline insisted, and because Jae-hyun had started timing his returns to overlap with her visits, though he would never admit that, and she never acknowledged it directly. The package contained jewelry. Expensive, traditional, the kind that comes with an implied message about what kind of woman should be wearing it. The card inside said, "For the woman brave enough to know when she's in over her head." The third was a photograph, slid under the door of her apartment at 2 in the morning. It was a photograph of her walking into the compound. The timestamp in the corner was 3 weeks earlier. Whoever had taken it had been watching her long enough to know her schedule. She sat on the floor of her apartment and looked at the photograph for a long time. Then she called the one person whose number she had saved under a name that wasn't his, because she hadn't been ready to admit, even to her phone contacts, what calling him actually meant. He answered on the second ring. "Someone has been following me," she said. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted exactly 3 seconds. "Don't open the door for anyone," he said. "I'm sending someone now." "I don't need Amara." His voice was flat and entirely serious. "Don't argue with me about this one." She didn't argue. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall and the photograph in her lap and listened to the sounds of Seoul at 2 in the morning filtering through her thin windows. And she thought about what it meant that she had called him first, before her friends, before her roommate down the hall, before anyone else. She knew what it meant. She was not ready to think about what it meant. The security detail arrived in 8 minutes. She let them in. She handed over the photograph. She answered their questions calmly and precisely, and then, when they were gone, she cried for about 3 minutes, which was all she allowed herself, and then stopped. What she didn't know yet was that, while she was sitting on her floor, Jae-hyun was sitting behind the wheel of a car parked half a block from her building, engine off, watching the lights in her window. He had driven himself. He had not told anyone. He sat there for 2 hours before he drove away, telling himself it was a security precaution. He was a very good liar to everyone except himself. And in the part of him that was still capable of honesty, he already knew what was happening to him. He just wasn't ready for it either. The morning after, Jae-hyun didn't come to the compound. He sent Park instead, with a black duffel bag containing a new phone, locked to a private network, and a brief typed note that said, "Use this. Don't go back to your apartment until I say so." No signature, no explanation, just the phone and the 4 lines of instruction, which was exactly the kind of communication that would have annoyed her less if she hadn't spent half the previous night wondering whether he was going to show up at her door himself. He hadn't. She sat with the new phone on Madeline's kitchen table and turned it over in her hands and thought about what it said about a person, about her, that she had expected him to come. Madeline put tea in front of her without asking. "He doesn't sleep when something worries him," the old woman said, settling into the chair across the table. "He never has. Since he was 8 years old, he would pace the hallway outside my room when he was frightened, and when I opened the door, he would pretend he was just getting water." Amara looked at her. "He's not 8. "No," Madeline agreed, "but he's still pacing." Amara set the phone down. "This isn't... I'm not his responsibility. Someone is trying to scare me. That's different from being in danger." "Is it?" She didn't answer because she wasn't sure, and she didn't want to say something false to an old woman who had a talent for knowing when she was being lied to. She stayed at the compound that night. She told herself it was practical. Jae-hyun came back on the second day. He came in through the side entrance at 6:30 in the evening, still wearing a jacket that looked like he'd slept in it, which she suspected he had, though she also suspected no one in this household would ever say that to his face. He stopped in the doorway of the main sitting room when he saw her, and for a moment they just looked at each other across the length of the room without either of them finding a reason to move. "The photograph was taken by someone on our network," he said. "Not a greeting. A report. Internal. Someone who knew your schedule because they had access to my calendar." Amara absorbed that. "That narrows it." "Not enough," he said. "Not yet." He crossed the room and sat in the chair nearest the window. Not the chair closest to her, she noticed, and put his hands flat on his thighs in the posture of someone containing something that would be inconvenient to express. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. "You should go back to Kenya," he said. The words landed with the specific flatness of something he had been rehearsing. No, she said. Someone inside my organization is targeting you. That means this will escalate. I said no. He looked at her. You're a student who got pulled into something she didn't choose. There's no shame in... If you finish that sentence, Amara said, I'm going to leave this room and you're going to have to come find me to apologize, and I don't think you're good at apologizing. His jaw tightened. I'm trying to protect you. You're trying to make me easier to manage, she said. Those are different things. I have a brother who needs surgery and a scholarship that doesn't defer for personal emergencies and 8 months of work invested in being here. I'm not leaving because someone sent me an ugly note and a photograph. It's not a note, it's a threat. I know what it is. I grew up in Nairobi. I know what threats look like. She held his gaze. What are you actually afraid of? Me being in danger or me being in danger in your world, which makes it your problem? The silence in the room changed quality. He looked away first, which was not something she had seen him do before. Both, he said finally, which was probably the most honest single word she had ever heard him produce. She didn't push it. She let it sit between them, and she watched the muscle in his jaw work. And she thought about the 8-year-old boy pacing the hallway pretending he just wanted water. The proposal happened 4 days later, in the worst possible way. She had been in the compound study, working on her thesis chapter, when the sound of raised voices filtered through from the dining room. Not shouting, the Kong household didn't do open shouting, but the kind of controlled pressing intensity that carries through walls because the walls are not thick enough for the weight of what's being said. She heard Madeline's name. She heard Jaehyun's name. She heard another voice, male, older, meticulous. A voice that spoke Korean with the precision of someone who had learned long ago that every word was a potential weapon. She stayed at her desk and pretended she couldn't hear it. 20 minutes later, Jaehyun knocked once on the study door and opened it without waiting for her answer, which was a habit she had noticed and had not yet decided to address. I need to ask you something, he said. She looked up from her laptop. His expression was neutral in the very specific way that meant it was costing him something to keep it that way. Sit down, she said. He didn't sit. He stood with his shoulder against the doorframe and his arms crossed, which was the physical equivalent of a person trying to look like they hadn't just come from an argument. My family has been pressuring me to formalize a relationship, he said, for several years. It's about succession optics inside the organization. They want visible stability. Amara put her pen down. Okay. You've been here for several weeks. You've met the family. Madeline, he paused. My grandmother speaks about you in a way she has not spoken about anyone in a long time. I like her too, Amara said carefully. There is a specific family function in 5 weeks, he said, and a shareholder meeting the week after that. At both of them, the question of my personal stability will be raised explicitly. He looked at the wall to the left of her head, which she recognized as the direction people look when they can't quite look at you. I want to propose an arrangement, a temporary engagement, 6 months, public-facing only. It would stop the family pressure and give me time to restructure the organization the way I need to. The study was very quiet. You're asking me to pretend to be your fiancé, she said. Yes. So that powerful men in a criminal organization will stop asking inconvenient questions. He looked at her now, full on. Yes. And you're asking me specifically because you're already here, he said. Because my grandmother already trusts you. Because you are clearly capable of holding yourself in difficult rooms without falling apart. And because... He stopped. Because, she said. Because I trust you more than I would trust someone from inside this world. Which I recognize is not a particularly romantic reason. It's not a romantic proposal at all, she said. No, he agreed. It isn't. She should have said no immediately. She knew that. The answer was so clearly no that she opened her mouth to say it, and then thought about Kofi, about the last call from Nairobi, about her mother's voice carefully not asking how bad it was because she already knew, about the surgery estimate she had printed and folded into the back of her thesis notebook because she couldn't throw it away and couldn't look at it directly, about the specific and humiliating reality of being brilliant and broke and watching a door stand open in front of you. I have conditions, she said. Something shifted in his face. Very small. Very controlled. Name them, he said. I'm not decorative, she said. I'm not going to stand beside you and smile and nod and disappear when the men start talking. I'm a person. You treat me like one. Agreed. No one tells me what to wear, how to speak, or what opinions to have. If I think your investors are wrong, I'm going to say so. If I think a meeting is being run badly, I'm going to say that too. That will cause problems. Then you should find someone easier to arrange, she said. Those are my terms. A long pause. He uncrossed his arms. What else? He said. She told him about Kofi. It was the first time she had told anyone in Seoul. The full version, not the simplified one she kept ready for casual questions. She told him about the diagnosis and the surgery timeline and the amount that existed between what the family had and what the procedure cost. She said the number out loud, which she had only done twice before, because hearing it in the air made it real in a way that was still difficult to absorb. Chae-hyun listened without interrupting, which was one of the things she had noticed about him. He listened the way very few people listened, without the face of someone waiting for their turn to speak. I'll have it transferred to the hospital directly, he said, before we sign anything. After, she said, I don't want to owe you something before I know what I'm agreeing to. He studied her for a long moment. Most people would take the money first. I know, she said. I'm not most people. They wrote the terms down that night, the two of them at the study desk, passing a legal pad back and forth. It was a strange and slightly absurd thing to be doing, negotiating the terms of a fake engagement by the light of a desk lamp while Seoul hummed outside the windows. But there was something almost clarifying about it, the explicitness of it, the way it forced both of them to say out loud what they expected and what they would not tolerate. She signed her name at the bottom. He signed his. He looked at the page for a moment. You should know, he said, that whoever is sending you those messages, they'll see this as a provocation. Making you my fiancé will increase the attention. I know, she said, and you're still agreeing. I have conditions and a plan, and I'm not afraid of your enemies, she said. Are we done? He stood and picked up the legal pad. We're done, he said. He left. She sat alone in the study for several minutes, looking at where her name was written in her own handwriting, and thought about all the ways this could go wrong, which was a long list in which she was too exhausted to finish cataloging before she fell asleep at the desk for the second time that week. Moving into the penthouse was worse than she'd expected, and she'd expected it to be bad. It wasn't the penthouse itself. The penthouse was in every material sense extraordinary, the kind of space that existed at a remove from ordinary life, with walls of glass and light that moved through rooms in ways that seemed almost designed. It was that the penthouse was his, absolutely, in a way that no amount of additional furniture or allocated drawer space could change. Everything in it reflected a particular kind of order, deliberate, controlled, slightly cold. Books arranged by publication date, kitchen drawers organized with a precision that implied he found disorder personally threatening, a coat closet where every item was facing the same direction. She unpacked her 3 pairs of shoes and lined them up in the secondary closet and stood looking at them for a moment. You can use the main closet, he said from the doorway. There's space. I'm fine, she said. I'm not... He paused. I'm not trying to contain you to a secondary closet. That's not... Jae-hyun. She turned around. I know, I'm fine. Let's not make this more uncomfortable than it already is. He nodded once and left. She put the shoes in the main closet. The first week was a performance in sustained politeness. They ate dinner at opposite ends of the same table and discussed the logistics of the next family appearance, and went to their respective rooms and slept, or didn't sleep, separately. He was careful with her in a way that felt like the emotional equivalent of someone walking on freshly waxed floors, deliberate, cautious, very aware of where he was placing weight. She understood it. She matched it. She was also exhausted by it by the 3rd day. The break, when it came, was over rice. She had been attempting to make ugali with what was available in a kitchen stocked for a different kind of cuisine, and the result was something that didn't quite match the memory of it, but was close enough to be satisfying in the way that imperfect familiar things are satisfying. She didn't hear him come in. He moved through rooms without announcing himself, which was a habit that she found alternately useful and maddening. And she turned around to find him standing at the kitchen entrance, watching her cook with an expression of genuine uncertainty. I don't know what that is, he said. I know you don't, she said. Sit down. Sit down and eat something, she said. You look like you haven't had a real meal since before I moved in. He sat down. He ate. He didn't say anything for several minutes, which was fine because she didn't need him to. And then, somewhere in the middle of it, he said, It's good. I know, she said. He almost smiled, not quite, but almost. My grandmother used to cook, he said, when I was young, before the organization got large enough that it became impractical. What did she make? Doenjang jigai, badly. She would never admit that. He looked at the bowl in front of him. She burnt the broth every time and told us it was supposed to be dark. Amara laughed before she could stop herself. He looked up. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be, he said. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. They sat with that for a moment. Outside the penthouse windows, souls spread in every direction, lit and enormous and indifferent. Tell me about your brother, he said. She hadn't expected that. She looked at him. You mentioned him once, he said. You didn't say much. His name is Kofi, she said. He's 22. He's studying engineering. He's funny. The kind of funny where he doesn't know he's funny, which is the best kind. She paused. He was diagnosed 8 months ago. He's been waiting for the surgery since January. Will he be all right? If the surgery happens, she said. Yes, if it doesn't... She stopped, picked up her spoon. It's going to happen. Jae-hyun was quiet. Then, the transfer cleared 3 days ago. The hospital confirmed it. She set the spoon down. She had not known the exact timing. She had been telling herself not to check because checking and finding it hadn't happened yet would have been worse than not knowing. Thank you, she said. You don't have to... I know I don't, she said. I'm saying it anyway. Thank you. Something passed across his face. Not quite discomfort, not quite the opposite. And he nodded once and looked back at his bowl. They washed the dishes together, which was not something either of them had planned and which neither of them commented on. The first real test came at the shareholders' dinner, 12 days into the arrangement. It was held at a private venue in Gangnam, the kind of place that existed specifically to make money feel effortless. All dark wood and carefully dim lighting and waitstaff trained to be present without being noticed. 47 people in the room, most of them men, most of them older, most of them carrying the specific weight of people who had spent decades acquiring power that couldn't be listed on public documents. Jae-hyun introduced her calmly, his hand at the small of her back, a practiced neutral touch that conveyed what it was supposed to convey, and she watched the room absorb her with the particular mixture of curiosity and calculation that powerful people use when encountering something they haven't been briefed on. She smiled where she needed to. She listened to 3 consecutive conversations about infrastructure finance without commenting, which was harder than it sounded because one of those conversations contained a fundamental error about East African port logistics that was affecting the investment model being discussed. On the 4th conversation, she commented, it was not a small comment. It was the kind of comment that redirects a 20-minute discussion in a different direction and involves specific data points and challenges, 2 assumptions that have apparently been circulating in this particular investment group for at least a year. She delivered it with the measured specificity of someone who is entirely aware that she is in a room where being wrong even once would cost her every piece of credibility she has built. She was not wrong. The room shifted. The investor who had been wrong, a trim man in his 60s named Chairman O, with the watchful eyes of someone who had built a career on never being publicly corrected, looked at her for a long moment. Who is your background with? He asked. Nairobi University and Seoul International Business, she said. Currently, he repeated, with the weight of a man who was recalculating. Currently, she agreed. Jae-hyun said nothing. He was standing half a step behind her, and she could not see his face, but she felt the shift in the quality of his attention, the difference between watching someone perform and watching someone be entirely themselves. Later, outside this venue. While they waited for the car, he stood beside her on the pavement in the late autumn cold and said nothing for a moment. Oh Sung-min has never been corrected at a dinner table, he said. I noticed, she said. He's been wrong for a long time. Someone should have done it earlier. You're going to be a problem, he said. You knew that, she said. It's in the contract. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh, but lived in the same vicinity. The car arrived. They got in. They rode back to the penthouse in the specific kind of silence that is not empty shab. The second threat arrived on a Wednesday, and it was not a note. It was her university enrollment status. She found out at the registrar's office at 9 in the morning, a Tuesday appointment she had made a week earlier to finalize her thesis approval schedule, when the administrator pulled up her file and frowned at the screen and said, in careful Korean, that there appeared to be a flag on her enrollment, an irregularity in her scholarship documentation, pending review. She would need to resubmit everything within 72 hours, or the scholarship would be suspended while the review was conducted. Amara stood at the counter and kept her face very still. What kind of irregularity? She asked. I'm not authorized to say specifically, the administrator said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. You'd need to speak to the scholarship office. The scholarship office told her that a complaint had been filed questioning the authenticity of her original transcripts from Nairobi. The complaint was anonymous. The review process would take a minimum of 3 weeks, during which her enrollment would be paused. She walked out of the university building into the bright cold of a Wednesday morning and stood on the pavement with her bag over her shoulder and her phone in her hand, and felt something she had been working to keep at a distance pressing against the inside of her chest with its full weight. This was not a note. This was not a photograph. This was someone reaching into the core of her life and pulling a thread. She called Chae-hyun. My scholarship is being reviewed, she said when he picked up. Someone filed a complaint about my transcripts. Anonymous. I have 72 hours before enrollment gets suspended. A pause. Where are you? Outside my university. Don't go anywhere, he said. I'm sending someone to you right now. And Amara? His voice shifted, 1 degree lower, 1 degree more focused. This is the same person. This is escalating. I know, she said. I know that. Are you all right? She almost said yes automatically. She stopped. No, she said. Not entirely. Another pause, different in quality from the first. I'll fix this, he said. It's not yours to fix. Someone inside my network attacked your scholarship because of me, he said. That makes it mine. She didn't argue, because her throat was doing something inconvenient, and she was standing on a public pavement in Seoul, and she was not going to cry on a public pavement in Seoul. Fine, she said. Fine, he said. Go to the cafe on the corner and wait for Park. She went to the cafe. She ordered tea she didn't drink. She sat by the window and watched the street, and thought about Kofi, about her mother, about the specific gamble she had made when she signed her name on a legal pad at a study desk 3 weeks ago. She had known there was risk. She had calculated it. She had not calculated how personal it would get. Park arrived in 14 minutes. He sat across from her without preamble and put a folder on the table. Inside the folder were printed transcripts, her actual transcripts, official, certified, with the Nairobi University seal, and a letter from a legal contact who had already been in touch with the scholarship office. Mr. Kang requests that you review these, Park said. The scholarship office will receive the official response within the hour. Amara looked at the folder. He already started working on this before he called me back. Yes, Park said simply. She sat with that for a moment. He had already been working on it. While she was standing on the pavement, while she was calling him. He had been doing something about it before she'd even finished describing the problem. She closed the folder. Tell him thank you, she said. He asked me to tell you he'll be home for dinner, Park said. She looked at Park. Park looked back with the expression of a man who was entirely aware of the weight of what he'd just said and was choosing not to comment on it. She looked out the window. Home. He had said home. Home. That evening shifted something between them that neither of them named. He came through the door at 7:30, and she was already in the kitchen, and they moved around each other in the small space with the slightly awkward choreography of two people who had not yet worked out the geography of sharing a room, and then somewhere in the overlap of reaching for the same cabinet handle, they stopped and stood 2 feet apart in a kitchen in Seoul and looked at each other. You had my transcripts certified before I called you, she said. I had them on file, he said, from the background check. You ran a background check on me. I run background checks on everyone. That's not... I know that's your process. She stopped. You could have led with that when I called. You could have said, I already have everything you need, calm down. But you didn't. You asked if I was all right. He said nothing. You asked if I was all right first, she said, before you told me about the documents. The kitchen was quiet except for the city outside. Yes, he said. I did. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. Neither of them moved toward the other. Neither of them moved away. And in the space between them, 2 feet of kitchen air, the smell of food, the weight of everything that hadn't been said in 3 weeks, something that had been under construction without either of them authorizing the project stood up and declared itself present. She was the one who turned back to the stove first. Eat, she said. It's getting cold. He sat down without another word. But that night, much later, he was still awake. She could tell from the line of light under his door. And she lay in her room on her side of the penthouse and thought about the 8-year-old boy pacing hallways pretending he wasn't afraid. And she thought about how some people spend so long learning to not need anything from anyone that they forget they were ever built for something else. She didn't knock on his door, but she thought about it for a long time. The family meeting was called without warning on a Thursday morning, and by the time Amara knew it was happening, she was already in the middle of it. She had come to the compound to see Madeline, a regular visit by now, unremarkable, the kind of thing that had become part of the week's texture without anyone formally deciding it would, and she had walked into the main sitting room to find 12 people she had never seen before arranged around it with the specific stillness of people who have been waiting for something and are now watching it arrive. Madeline was in her chair. Her face was composed and unreadable. Jae-hyun was standing near the window. He looked at Amara when she came in and said nothing, but his eyes moved to hers and then away in a single quick assessment that told her, something has changed. Be careful. The man at the head of the arrangement, seated in a chair that was technically the same as the others but somehow occupied differently, with the particular gravity of a person accustomed to rooms organizing themselves around his presence, was perhaps 60, lean, impeccably dressed, with eyes that moved across Amara like she was a document being read for errors. So, the man said, in Korean accented with something northern, something old. This is the girl. Jae-hyun said, Seo Min-kyu, my uncle. Seo Min-kyu, chairman of the organization's senior council. The name had appeared in several conversations in ways that suggested it was a name you were supposed to know without being told why. Miss Bennett, Seo said, in English. Deliberate. The choice of language itself a kind of message. I know who you are, and I am not on your territory. My nephew tells me you have been a valuable addition to our family's social calendar. I've appreciated getting to know the family, Amara said. I'm sure you have, Seo said. His smile was thin and did not reach his eyes, which were busy doing several things at once. It must be quite a change from your previous circumstances. All circumstances change, she said. Indeed. He leaned back in his chair. Your father's name was David Bennett, Kenyan, international trade consultant. He worked with this organization briefly, 25 years ago. Did you know that? The room became very still. Amara heard her own heartbeat exactly once before she locked it down. No, she said. No, Seo repeated. Interesting. His eyes moved to Jae-hyun. She says she doesn't know. She doesn't, Jae-hyun said, flat, controlled. 25 years ago, Seo continued, looking back at Amara with the measured patience of a man delivering something he has rehearsed. Your father accessed confidential financial information belonging to this organization. He copied it. He disappeared with it. He was never found. He paused. We suffered significant losses. Specific people suffered significantly. Amara's mouth was dry. My father was a trade consultant. He spent his career building legitimate business connections. Legitimate, Seo said the word carefully, like he was turning it over to look at the underside. Tell me, Miss Bennett, when a woman appears in the life of the son of the family her father betrayed, enters the home, earns the grandmother's trust, begins attending private investment meetings where sensitive financial matters are discussed. He tilted his head. How would you describe that? I would describe it as exactly what it is, she said, which is nothing you've just implied. Perhaps, Seo said, or perhaps you are your father's daughter in ways you haven't disclosed. He looked at Jae-hyun. The council requires clarity. This family cannot afford another mistake of this kind. The 12 people arranged around the room said nothing. They didn't need to. Their silence was its own kind of vote. Jae-hyun stood very still by the window. Amara looked at him. She did not beg. She was not built for begging, but she looked at him the way you look at someone when you need to know whether they are with you or not, when the answer to that question is the only answer that matters in the room, and she waited. He looked back at her, and then he looked at his uncle. I need time to review what you're saying, he said. This is not a conversation for today. It was not a defense. It was a delay. Amara understood the difference. Something in her chest changed its composition. Not broken, not yet, but altered. Like a bone that has taken weight, it wasn't designed to carry and is deciding, in this moment, whether it will hold or not. She excused herself from the room quietly. She walked through the compound's hallway and out the side door into the courtyard, where the cold hit her face and the city was loud beyond the walls. And she stood there and breathed, and did not let herself fall apart, because she was not on her own territory, and she was not going to fall apart on anyone else's floor. Behind her, through the wall, she could hear the muffled continuation of the meeting. She could not hear what Jae-hyun said. She stood in the cold for a long time, and she thought about her father, and she thought about a man who had just been given the chance to choose her, and had chosen, instead, to wait and see. And she thought, this is the moment. This is the one where I find out what he is actually made of. She went back inside. She sat through the rest of that meeting with her hands in her lap, and her face composed and her spine straight, because she was Amara Bennett, and she had not come this far to be smaller than this room required her to be. But something had shifted, and both of them knew it. The compound was quieter after the meeting than it had any right to be. People had filed out in the particular orderly way of people who have just participated in something they know they will not discuss openly, not from loyalty, but from the self-preserving instinct of those who understand that what gets said in certain rooms stays in certain rooms, or consequences follow. 12 people, and then 11, and then the room had been empty, except for Madeline in her chair, and Jae-hyun still standing at the window, and the residue of everything Seo Min-kyu had said hanging in the air like cigarette smoke in a closed space. Amara had gone back inside and sat through the last 20 minutes of it, with her hands folded in her lap and her face doing exactly what she needed her face to do. She had answered 2 more questions from SEO, measured, direct, without offering anything extra. And when the meeting dissolved, she had said goodbye to Madeline with genuine warmth and walked to the car with Park without looking back. She did not look for Jae-hyun on her way out. If he had something to say to her, he knew where she was. He didn't call that night. She lay in the penthouse in the dark and listened to the city and thought about her father. David Bennett had been 41 when she was born. He had been a quiet man, methodical, the kind of father who showed love through preparation. He had taught her to read financial statements before she was 12, had walked her through market analysis like it was a language she needed to acquire before she could go anywhere worth going. He had been gone for 9 years now, a stroke at 57, fast and without warning, the kind of death that doesn't allow for last conversations. She had never had a reason to question the shape of his life. She questioned it now, lying in the dark, and the questioning felt like pressing on a bruise you didn't know was there. By morning, she had made a decision. She was going to find out for herself. She knew one person in Seoul with the kind of access she needed, a woman named Ji-soo, a former investigative journalist who had shifted to private research consulting after a story about corporate corruption had made her too visible for mainstream newsrooms and too valuable for anyone with money to find uncomfortable. They had met through a university contact 3 months earlier. Ji-soo was small and precise and operated with the focused energy of someone who had learned that the truth was almost always worse than the rumor and had decided to be the person who found it anyway. Amara called her at 8 in the morning. "I need historical records on a business relationship," she said, 25 years back, between a Korean organization and a Kenyan national named David Bennett, Trade Consulting. Jisoo was quiet for a moment. "How sensitive?" "Very." "How quickly?" "As quickly as you can." Another pause. "Come to my office at noon. And Amara, bring whatever you have, even if it seems small. Documents, names, anything your father ever said about Korea." Amara had 2 things: a postcard her father had sent her mother from Seoul in 1999, which she'd found in a box after he died and kept without knowing why, and a name, Minguk Trading, which appeared once in her father's old contact book, which she had also kept, also without knowing quite why people keep the things they keep after someone dies. She photographed both and sent them to Jisoo before she left the penthouse. She told Jae-hyun where she was going, not because she needed to, but because she had made an agreement with him, and part of that agreement, the unwritten part, the part that existed in the negative space between their signed terms, was that she would not operate in shadows in his house. She sent him a text. "I'm looking into what your uncle said about my father. I need to know for myself. This doesn't affect the arrangement unless what I find changes things." He read it. She saw the red receipt. He didn't reply. She put the phone in her bag and took the subway to Jisoo's office in Mapo. Jisoo worked in an office that was barely larger than a walk-in closet, stacked to the ceiling with physical files and 3 computer monitors running things Amara didn't ask about. She had tea ready when Amara arrived, which suggested she had already been at this for hours. "Minguk Trading," Jisoo said, before Amara had fully sat down. "Front company, dissolved in 2001. It was used as a conduit for moving funds between the Kang organization and international shell accounts." She pulled a printed page from the stack nearest her elbow and slid it across the desk. Your father's name appears in 3 internal documents from 1999 as a consultant hired to facilitate market entry into East African trade networks. Amara looked at the page. Her father's name, in Hangul transliteration, in a document from 25 years ago, in Seoul. He was here, she said. For approximately 8 months, Jisoo said. He appears to have been contracted legitimately, consulting fees documented above board from his side. He was brought in because he had relationships with port authorities and trade bodies in Kenya and Tanzania. She paused. Then in late 1999, something changed. His name disappears from the internal communication records. The organization's internal audit from 2000 references a breach. Confidential financial structures were copied and transmitted to an external party. My father. That's the allegation, Jisoo said. But she held up one finger. Here's what Seo Min-kyu didn't tell you. She pulled a second page. This one was a scanned document, older, the edges slightly degraded. She set it in front of Amara and pointed to a block of text near the bottom. Amara's Korean was functional for conversation. Technical historical documents were harder. She read it slowly, twice, and felt the floor shift under her chair. This is a letter, she said slowly, to... Who is this? The address? It's addressed to the Korean Financial Intelligence Unit, Jisoo said, dated November 1999. It describes in specific detail the structure of a money laundering operation running through Minguk Trading, how the funds were moved, which accounts were used, which officials had been paid to look away. She let that land. It was submitted anonymously. Amara looked up. We don't know definitively that it was your father, Jisoo said carefully, but the details in this letter, the specific routing structures, the account numbers, they match exactly what appears in the consulting documents your father had access to. No one else in that consultation had this level of internal detail. She folded her hands on the desk. Someone tried to expose them. The report was buried. I don't know by whom, but it was never acted on. And 2 months after this letter was submitted, your father left Korea without completing his contract. Amara sat very still. He didn't steal the information, she said. He reported it. That's what this suggests, Jisoo said. Yes. The office was very quiet. Amara thought about her father at his desk in Nairobi, teaching her to read market reports, his careful handwriting in the margins, the way he had always said, the numbers don't lie, but the people presenting them usually do, so you have to know how to read past the presentation to the structure underneath. She thought about a man in Seoul in 1999, looking at a set of financial structures and understanding what he was looking at, and making a decision about what to do with that understanding. She thought about what it had cost him, not his life. He'd made it home. But his reputation inside an organization that had spent 25 years telling its own story about what he'd done. I need copies of everything, she said. Already made, Jisoo said, and pushed a folder across the desk. She called Jae-hyun from the street outside Jisoo's building. He picked up on the first ring this time. I need to see you, she said. Not at the penthouse. Not at the compound. Somewhere in between. A pause. There's a restaurant on Mapodaero. I'll send you the address. Come alone, she said. Another pause, different from the first. All right. She got there first. She sat at a corner table with the folder in front of her and a glass of water she didn't touch, and watched the door. When he came in, alone, as she'd asked, no park, no detail, she watched him scan the room, find her, and cross to the table with the particular controlled stride of someone managing something internal. He sat down. He looked at the folder. You found something, he said. My father didn't steal anything, she said. He reported your organization to the Financial Intelligence Authorities in 1999. He tried to expose the money laundering running through Minguk Trading. The report was buried. And then your family spent 25 years telling a different story about him. She slid the folder across the table. He looked at it. He didn't open it immediately. He sat with his hands flat on the table and looked at the folder with the expression of a man who is working through the implications of something before he allows himself to react to it. Did you know? She asked. No, he said. Look me in the eye and say that. He looked up. His eyes were dark and entirely steady. I did not know, he said. I was 8 years old in 1999. My father ran the organization then. My uncle was on the senior council. Your uncle, she said. Who framed my father. who has spent 25 years calling him a thief and a traitor, who walked into a room 2 days ago and used my dead father's name to question my integrity and suggest that I am here as a spy. Jae-hyun opened the folder. He read slowly. She watched his face, which gave almost nothing away. Almost, but not completely. There was a particular quality to the stillness that settled over him as he read. The stillness of a person absorbing information that is reorganizing several things at once. He closed the folder. I need to verify this independently, he said. Jisoo is one of the most credible private researchers in Seoul, Amara said. But yes, verify it. Because when you do, you're going to have a decision to make about your uncle. I'm aware of that. And about your family, she said. And about what your organization has been built on. And about what it means that the man you just let your uncle publicly humiliate was the person who tried to do the right thing. He said nothing. What are you going to do? She asked. He looked at her. What I do is not something I can answer in a restaurant in Mapo. That's not good enough, she said. I know it isn't, he said. I'm telling you what I have, not what you deserve. She sat back. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who moved through rooms like they reorganized themselves for him, who had kissed her forehead exactly once when she'd been half asleep on the study sofa and had never mentioned it, who kept his coat hangers all facing the same direction and burned his grandmother's broth on the phone twice a week without ever reducing the call time. You have 3 days, she said. Amara, 3 days, Jae-hyun, and then I'm going to make my own decision about what to do with this information. He didn't argue. He nodded once. She picked up her bag and left him at the table with the folder and a glass of water that was also untouched. The 3 days were the worst kind of waiting. The kind where enough information exists to be devastating but not enough to act on. So there is nothing to do but continue living the architecture of a daily life, while the actual substance of things is being decided somewhere out of your reach. She went to her university. She attended her thesis seminar. She answered emails from her mother about Kofi's pre-surgery appointments with the calm and detail her mother needed. She cooked dinner at the penthouse and left a portion for Jae-hyun without comment, and he came home late both nights and ate it at the counter standing up. And neither of them forced a conversation, neither of them was ready to have. On the second night, he sat down while she was still at the table with her laptop. I pulled the original 1999 audit records, he said, and 3 internal communications from the senior counsel that year. She closed the laptop. Jisoo is right, he said. The report to the Financial Intelligence Unit matches the structure of what your father was consulting on. And there's a memo, council-level, senior signatures, from January 2000 that discusses a breach and how it is to be characterized going forward. He paused. My uncle's signature is on the memo. My father's is not. She absorbed that. Your father didn't know. I don't believe he did, Jae-hyun said. He died believing what Seo told him. His jaw was tight. My uncle managed the narrative from the beginning. He controlled what the council knew, what my father was told, and what went into the family's institutional memory. He looked at his hands. He's been on the senior council for 31 years. He knows where every document is buried. Including this one, apparently, Amara said, which he missed. He didn't miss it, Jae-hyun said. He tried to have it destroyed. According to one of Jisoo's additional contacts, the financial intelligence report was pulled from the official record in early 2000. What she found is from a secondary archive that wasn't properly cross-referenced with the deletion order. It survived by accident. Your uncle tried to erase my father completely, she said. Yes. She stood up and walked to the window. Seoul at night was always lit in ways that made it look like the city refused to accept darkness entirely. Lights from 1,000 buildings pressing back against the sky. What happens when you confront him? She asked. I don't know yet, Jae-hyun said. He has 31 years of alliances inside the organization. Senior council members who owe him. Files on people that can be used. He's not going to accept a confrontation without fighting back. And fighting back means he'll use whatever he has, Jae-hyun said, including you. She turned from the window. Me, specifically. You're the exposure point, he said. You have the documents. If it comes out that David Bennett's daughter is engaged to the Kang heir and is sitting on evidence of a senior council cover-up, SEO will frame that as the final proof of what he's been saying, that you came here with a purpose, that the engagement is a long game. That's insane. It's effective, he said. In this world, the most coherent story wins. Truth is secondary to narrative control. She looked at him. Then control the narrative first. That's what I'm trying to work out, he said. How to do that without giving him time to preempt it. How long do you need? Days, he said. Maybe a week. You have 4 days left, she said. My 3 + 1. He held her gaze. All right. She went to her room. She lay on her back in the dark and thought about all the things that were in motion and all the ways they could collide. And she thought about her father and soul in 1999, doing the right thing in a room full of powerful people and paying for it with his reputation and his name. And she thought, I am my father's daughter, in exactly the way Seo Min-kyu said, just not the way he meant. The call came on the fourth day at 11 in the morning. It was not from Jae-hyun. It was from a number she didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end was a woman. Low, precise, speaking Korean with the accent of someone who had grown up between dialects. Miss Bennett, my name is Yoon. I work with Chairman Seo. He would like to meet with you, privately. Today. Amara was standing in the university library. She moved toward the exit. Why? She said. He has a proposal for you, Yoon said. One he believes will benefit both parties significantly. Does Jae-hyun know about this call? A half-second pause. This is a private conversation between the chairman and yourself. I see, Amara said. She thought about calling Jae-hyun immediately. She thought about it for the length of time it took her to push through the library door into the cold outside, which was approximately 6 seconds. Then she thought about her father, about what it meant to be framed by a man who was very good at controlling rooms and information and the stories people carried inside organizations. About the fact that if she brought Jae-hyun into this, Seo would know she had, and would adjust accordingly. Where? She said. The location was a private meeting suite in a hotel in Jung-gu, the kind of neutral ground that isn't really neutral because it's been selected by the party with more power, which is its own kind of message. The suite was decorated with the careful impersonality of expensive temporary spaces, everything tasteful and nothing personal. Seo Min-kyu was already seated when she arrived. He was alone except for Yoon, who stood near the door and did not introduce herself. He was dressed in a charcoal suit and looked entirely at ease, which was the most unsettling thing about him. He always looked at ease, the way men look at ease when they have spent decades making sure that the ground beneath them is solid before they step on it. Miss Bennett, he said, thank you for coming. You said you had a proposal, she said. She did not sit. Please. He gestured at the chair across from him. She sat. She put her bag on her lap and kept her hands visible, which was a habit from her father. When people can see your hands, they think you have nothing to hide. Use that. You've been researching your father, Seo said. Not a question. Yes, she said. I expected you would, he said. You strike me as someone who doesn't accept a narrative without verification. That is a quality I respect, actually. He picked up a cup of tea from the table beside him, unhurried, the gesture of someone settling in. What did you find? I think you know what I found, she said. Perhaps, he said, but I'd like to hear your version. My father tried to report your organization's financial crimes to the authorities in 1999, she said. The report was suppressed. He left Korea. Your organization spent 25 years calling him a traitor when he was the only person in that situation trying to do the right thing. Seo was quiet for a moment. That is one interpretation of events, he said. It's what the documents show. Documents, he said, are artifacts of perspective. The person who creates the document controls what the document says. He set down his cup. Your father accessed confidential financial structures that did not belong to him. What he intended to do with that information, whether he called it whistleblowing or something else, resulted in significant damage to people who had families, who had obligations, who were harmed by the exposure of their names and accounts. He leaned forward slightly. I protected those people. That is what I have always done. By framing an innocent man. By managing a situation, he said, that would have been far messier without management. She looked at him. She kept her face still. Her father had taught her that too. The moment you let someone see that they've landed a hit, you give them the map to the rest of your defenses. What is your proposal? She said. Seo reached into the jacket pocket of his suit and produced a single folded sheet of paper. He set it on the table between them. You leave, he said. Voluntarily. You tell Jae-hyun that the arrangement has become too complicated. You've decided to return to Kenya, prioritize your family, whatever reason you choose. You take the documents you found and you do not share them with anyone inside this organization or any external authority. He nodded at the paper. In exchange, your brother's medical care is fully funded for the next 5 years, whatever he needs, and you receive a settlement that will pay for your education and establish you professionally, wherever you choose to go." The room was very quiet. Amara looked at the folded paper. She did not touch it. "You're asking me to walk away from evidence of a cover-up that destroyed my father's name," she said. "I'm asking you to make a practical decision," he said, "one that protects your family and allows you to build the future you actually want. And if I don't? Then the documents you have will be characterized exactly as I described at the family meeting," he said. "You will be seen as someone who came into this family carrying a 25-year grudge, gathering evidence for an exposure that was pre-planned." His voice didn't change register. "Jae-hyun will be forced to choose between protecting you and protecting the organization. I believe you already have some sense of how that choice tends to go." She thought about the family meeting, about Jae-hyun standing at the window saying, "I need time to review what you're saying." The delay. Not a defense, a delay. "You're threatening me," she said. "I'm presenting options," he said, "with their respective consequences. You are an intelligent woman. I'm treating you like one." She looked at the folded paper on the table. She looked at Seo, and then she said, "I need 24 hours. Something very small moved behind his eyes. Satisfaction, she thought. He had expected her to fight, and she had asked for time instead, which was the response of someone calculating, which meant she was considering it, which meant he had her. He thought he had her. 24 hours, he said. Of course. She stood. She picked up her bag. She did not take the paper. "I'll be in touch," she said. She walked out of the hotel suite with her spine straight and her hands steady, and she took the elevator down to the lobby and walked through it and out through the revolving door onto the street, and then she stood on the pavement of Junggu and pulled out her phone. She did not call Jae-hyun. She called Jisoo. "I need you to make copies of everything," she said. 3 sets. Send one to a secure external server. Keep one yourself. Give one to a legal contact who is entirely outside this city's criminal networks." "What happened?" Jisoo said. "Seo Min-kyu just tried to buy my silence," she said. "Which means he's afraid of what I have. Which means it's more damaging than even we thought." She started walking. "Do it now, before 24 hours. "Already doing it," Jisoo said. Amara hung up. She stood at a crossing and waited for the light and thought about what Seo had said. That Jae-hyun would choose the organization over her. That the choice was already made in the architecture of who he was and how he'd been built. She didn't know if he was right, but she knew she was about to find out. She got back to the penthouse at 4:30, and Jae-hyun was already there, which was not his usual schedule. And the look on his face when she came through the door told her that he already knew something. Not everything, but the shape of something. "SEO called a council meeting for tomorrow morning," he said. "Full senior council. He's moving faster than I expected." She set her bag down. "He called me today." Jae-hyun went very still. "He offered me money to leave," she said. "To take the documents and disappear and not say anything to anyone." The stillness turned into something else, something harder and colder. "He contacted you directly?" "Yes." "Without telling me?" "Yes." He turned away from her. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her and one hand pressed flat against the glass, which was the posture of a man containing something at significant personal cost. "What did you say?" he asked. "I said I needed 24 hours, she said. "To make him think I was considering it. I spent that time making sure copies of everything are in places he can't reach." Jae-hyun turned back around. He looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't call me," he said, "when he contacted you. You didn't call me first." The words were flat, not accusatory, but they had weight. "No," she said. "Why?" She held his gaze. "Because I needed to know what he said to me before you were in the room, and because—" She stopped. "Because the last time I was in a room where you had to choose, you chose to wait, and I needed to handle this one myself." The words landed. She watched them land. She watched something happen in his face that he was not entirely succeeding in controlling. "The family meeting," he said. "Yes. I know you didn't side with him," she said. "But you didn't side with me either. You asked for time to review. In a room where he had just suggested I was a spy. In front of 12 people." She kept her voice even. "That's a fact. I'm not punishing you for it. I'm explaining why I handled today the way I did." He looked at her. The muscle in his jaw was working. "What do you need from me now?" he said finally. "The council meeting tomorrow," she said. What happens there? He's going to move to have you formally removed from my personal life on the grounds of the breach of trust allegation, Jae-hyun said. It's a formal council motion. If it passes, I'm bound by organizational protocol to comply. Will it pass? He has the votes, Jae-hyun said, unless I challenge the motion directly. And to challenge it, I need to present the counter evidence, which means tomorrow morning is the moment. Then present it, she said. If I do that, he said, I'm declaring war on my uncle inside the organization. He'll call in every alliance he has. There will be a period where the organization is divided and I am genuinely exposed. I know, she said, and you're still telling me to do it. I'm not telling you to do anything, she said. I'm telling you what I found and what happened today, and I'm telling you that I've already secured the documents outside anyone's reach. What you do tomorrow is your choice. But I need to know tonight what that choice is going to be, because if you're not going to challenge him, I need to know that too. He looked at her for a long, long moment, and then he said, I'll challenge him. She breathed. You're sure? No, he said, but I'm doing it. She nodded once. Then we need to spend the next 12 hours preparing your case. Yes, he said. Sit down, she said. I have Jisoo's full file. He sat. She opened the folder on the table between them and they worked through it together. The documents, the memo, the communication trail, the archive record of the financial intelligence report. And outside the penthouse windows, Seoul went dark and then glittered back to life, and neither of them looked up from the table for a very long time. At 2 a.m, he made coffee. He set a cup in front of her without asking how she took it, which was how she liked it, which she had never told him, which meant he had noticed at some point without her knowing he was paying that kind of attention. She looked at the cup. She looked at him. My father would have liked you, she said. Not who you were, who you're deciding to be. He held her gaze. He sounds like someone worth being liked by. She picked up the coffee. He was. They went back to work. At 4 a.m, with the case as solid as 12 hours could make it, she finally said, You should sleep for 2 hours. You need to be sharp. So do you, he said. I'll sleep after, she said. He stood up from the table. He looked at her, the full direct look that he used rarely, and that always felt like being read rather than seen. Amara, he said. Go sleep, she said. We'll talk after the meeting. He went. She sat alone at the table with the folders and the cooling coffee, and the weight of the folders and the cooling coffee, and the weight of the next morning pressing against the inside of her chest. And she thought about 12 people in a room and 31 years of alliances, and a man who had spent those years making sure the ground was solid before he stepped on it. And she thought about Jae-hyun walking into that room in 5 hours, and she thought, please, for once, let the right thing actually work. She folded her arms on the table and put her head down. She did not sleep, but she stayed very still, which was the closest she could manage, and outside the windows the city kept doing what cities do, moving, breathing, indifferent. And somewhere in the darkness, Seo Min-kyu was making his own preparations, and the morning was coming whether any of them were ready for it or not. The council meeting was called for 9 a.m. Jae-hyun was dressed and at the table by 6:30, reviewing the file one more time with the focused stillness of a man who has already made his decision and is now simply making sure the ground beneath it is solid. Amara watched him from the kitchen doorway. She had not slept. Her eyes felt like they'd been scraped clean, and the coffee she was holding had gone cold 20 minutes ago without her noticing. He looked up once. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say that hadn't been said at 2 a.m. over a table full of documents, and both of them understood that what came next was not something that could be improved by more talking. Park arrived at 7:15 to drive him to the compound. At the door, Jae-hyun stopped. He turned back. Whatever happens in there, he said, I need you to know that I'm not doing this because the documents forced me to. She looked at him. I'm doing it because it's right, he said. And because you were right in the family meeting when you looked at me and waited. I should have spoken then. I didn't, and that's... He stopped. That's not something I can undo. But this morning, I can do something else. She held her coffee cup with both hands because she needed something to hold. Go, she said. Don't be late to your own war. Something crossed his face. Not a smile, but the shape of one, the ghost of one. And then he turned and walked out, and the door closed, and she stood in the penthouse alone with the cold coffee and the folder of documents and the sound of Seoul in the early morning pressing in through the windows. She sat down. She waited. The compound's council room was a space designed for authority. Long table, dark wood, chairs with enough weight to them that sitting down felt like a statement. The room held no natural light, windows covered by heavy curtains. The lighting overhead warm but controlled, directed, the kind of light that makes faces legible but eliminates the softening effect of daylight. Everything in the room was built to make the people inside it feel the gravity of decisions made there. SEO Minkyu arrived 4 minutes before the scheduled time, which was his usual practice. Not first, not last, positioned at the point where maximum authority could be observed entering. He was accompanied by 2 council members Jae-hyun, recognized as his oldest alliances inside the organization, men who had served with CO for more than 2 decades, and who moved through the compound with the settled ease of people who have long understood which way the power runs. Jae-hyun was already seated at the head of the table when Seo entered. This was a deviation from the usual arrangement, and Seo registered it with one slow blink before he took his own chair. Around the table, 9 council members in total. Senior leadership, the men and one woman who made the decisions that moved below the surface of the organization's visible operations. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Seo said. His voice was the same as always, measured, warm in the way expensive things are warm, controlled. "I've asked for this meeting because I believe we are facing a situation that requires formal council attention before it becomes more complicated." He had 3 pages of prepared material. He distributed them himself, standing and moving around the table with the ease of a man comfortable with the room. Jae-hyun watched him place a copy in front of each chair without taking his own eyes off Seo's face. The document summarized what Seo had presented at the family meeting, with additions. Additional detail about David Bennett's alleged conduct, a timeline of Amara's arrival in Seoul, a reconstruction of her access to the organization's social and investment circles. It was thorough. It was very well written. It made a coherent story. It was also built on a foundation that Jae-hyun now knew was a lie. Seo returned to his seat. "Miss Bennett has had access to sensitive investment discussions, family assets, and internal social networks. The security of this organization? I have a counter-presentation," Jae-hyun said. The room went still. Seo looked at him. The warmth in his expression did not disappear. It simply became something different underneath, the way the surface of water looks unchanged even when the current changes below it. "Jae-hyun," he said, with the specific gentle patience of a man addressing someone who doesn't yet understand the situation they're in. "I understand this is personally difficult. That's why I wanted to give the council the opportunity to—" "You contacted Miss Bennett directly yesterday," Jae-hyun said. "You offered her money and a settlement in exchange for her silence and her departure." He looked around the table. "Without informing me, without council authorization." The room was very still. "I was managing a sensitive situation," Seo said, "in the family's best interest." "You were managing your own exposure," Jae-hyun said, "and I can demonstrate that." He opened the folder. What followed was 45 minutes of the most controlled rage Jae-hyun had ever performed in that room, and he was aware the entire time of exactly what it was: performance backed by truth, which is the most dangerous kind. He walked through each document methodically. The 1999 consulting records, David Bennett's name in the internal communications, the structure of Minguk Trading and the money laundering operation it was built around, the financial intelligence report submitted in November 1999. The council memo from January 2000 with Seo's signature authorizing how the breach was to be characterized going forward. Those were the words in the memo, characterized going forward, which were perhaps the most damning 3 words in any document Jae-hyun had ever read, because they were the words of a man who knew the truth and chose to replace it with something more useful. He laid it all on the table, literally. Documents in front of every council member, copies, certified. SEO did not speak for the first 15 minutes. He sat with his hands folded in front of him and listened with the expression of a man who is calculating rather than reacting, which told Jae-hyun that Seo had known this moment was possible and had already decided what to do in it. When he finally spoke, his voice had not changed register. "These documents are archived material from a period of significant organizational instability," Seo said. "They require context that a partial file cannot provide. What you are presenting, Jae-hyun, is a selection of records that tells one version of a story that is considerably more complex." "Then provide the context," Jae-hyun said. "In time," Seo said. "This is not the appropriate venue for a document-by-document analysis." "You called this meeting," Jae-hyun said. "You set the venue. You set the time. You prepared material and distributed it around this table without my knowledge. He looked directly at his uncle. This is exactly the appropriate venue. One of the council members, a woman named Director Han, the organization's most senior financial officer, who had been with the Kong family for 23 years and who Jae Hyun had always understood as someone who valued precision above loyalty, was reading the memo with her reading glasses on, her expression giving nothing away. She looked up. Chairman Seo, she said, this signature on the January 2000 memo, is this yours? A pause. 1 second. 2. It may be, Seo said. I signed a significant number of council-level communications in that period. Without reviewing the full context, it's a distinctive signature, Director Han said. She looked at the document again. And the language here characterized the breach as an act of hostile intelligence extraction. This is specific language, deliberate. Someone chose these words carefully. Director Han, Seo began. I'm asking a clarifying question, she said, with the mild firmness of a woman who has spent 23 years in rooms full of men who interpret female directness as aggression and has stopped adjusting her tone to accommodate that interpretation. Did you write this memo? The room held its breath. SEO looked at Director Han with the expression of a man who has just recalculated something significant. I need time to review the archive material, he said. That's not an answer to my question, she said. It was the first crack. Hairline thin. But in a room made of the specific material this room was made of, pride, history, the accumulated weight of institutional loyalty, hairline cracks had consequences. Jae Hyun watched the room shift 1 degree in a direction it had not been pointing when they sat down. CO called a recess. He said he needed 20 minutes to review additional material that would provide the necessary context. Several council members stood and stretched. Director Han stayed seated, rereading the financial intelligence report. 2 of CO's longtime allies moved to his end of the table and spoke to him in low voices, which Jae Hyun observed from across the room without appearing to observe. Park appeared in the doorway and caught Jae Hyun's eye. He tipped his head slightly toward the hall. Jae Hyun walked out. He made a call 5 minutes into the recess, Park said quietly, to Lee Sung-woo, outside counsel, the organizational attorney. He's trying to build a legal frame around the memo, Jae Hyun said. More than that, Park said. The call lasted 4 minutes. The last thing he said before he hung up was, Park paused, and Jae Hyun could tell he was being precise with the language. Deal with the source. The hallway was quiet. The source, Jae Hyun said. Yes, Park said. They looked at each other. Ji-soo, Jae Hyun said. Possibly, Park said. Or Amara, Jae Hyun said. He had his phone out before Park finished the sentence, and he was dialing before the thought had fully articulated itself in his mind. And the call went to voicemail, and he stood in the hallway of the compound where he had grown up and felt something cold and specific spread through his chest from the center outward. He called Park's secondary contact, the detail assigned to the penthouse building. 3 rings. 4. She left 20 minutes ago, the contact said. On foot, toward Mapodaero. She didn't take the car. He hung up. She went to Jisoo's office, he said. Do you want me to? Go, Jae Hyun said. Now, both locations. And call me the moment you have eyes on her. Park moved. Jae Hyun walked back into the council room. He sat down. He picked up the water glass in front of him. He drank it. He set it back down. He was going to finish this meeting, and then he was going to fix whatever was being arranged right now in the 20 minutes CO had bought himself with a recess. The recess lasted 31 minutes, not 20. When Seo returned to the table, his composure was fully restored. Whatever calculation had happened in those 31 minutes had settled into something, and the something had given him back the quality of ease that was his primary instrument. I have reviewed the archive, he said, and I want to address the council directly about the 2000 memo. He sat. He looked around the table with the particular gravity of a man about to deliver a confession that is also, somehow, a defense. In 2000, he said, this organization was facing a genuine security threat. David Bennett had accessed internal financial structures that, if fully exposed, would have resulted in the prosecution of individuals who had families, people who had served this organization loyally. I made a decision. Yes, I made that decision. To protect those people by controlling how the breach was characterized. He paused. I do not apologize for protecting them. That is what I have always done. What I did not do was fabricate evidence. The breach was real. The access was unauthorized. The threat was genuine. He looked at Jae-hyun. What your fiancé has presented to you, he said, is a partial account constructed to look like exoneration. It is not. It is a reframing. The financial intelligence report, Jae-hyun began, was submitted by someone with access to our internal structures, Seo said. Whether that was Bennett acting on conscience or acting on instruction from a competing interest, that question was never conclusively answered. I made a judgment call in a crisis. I stand by it. Director Han was writing something. The council members who had been neutral when they walked in were now looking between Jae-hyun and Seo with the careful attention of people trying to determine which direction to lean. Jae-hyun's phone vibrated in his jacket pocket. He did not look at it. The question before this council, Seo said, is not what happened in 1999. The question is what is happening now. A woman with a direct line to Bennett family history has been inside our organization for 4 months. She has attended investment meetings. She has had access to my nephew's personal communications and schedule. And she is currently, he paused, and the pause was theatrical, precisely timed, in the process of distributing copies of internal council documents to external parties. The room shifted. That is what the financial intelligence report represents, Seo said. Not an act of conscience, a pattern. Jae-hyun's phone vibrated again. He stood up. Excuse me, he said. Hotep. The call was from Park's secondary contact, not Park himself. Park is at Jisoo's office, the contact said. He says you need to come. Miss Bennett is there. There were 2 men when she arrived. They've been removed. A pause. But Park says come now. Jae-hyun was moving before the sentence was finished. He walked back into the council room. He did not sit. He looked at the table, at Director Han, at the neutral members, at Seo. And he said, with the specific flatness that people who knew him recognized as the register that meant something serious had already been decided, "This meeting is adjourned. I will reconvene when I return." You cannot simply, Seo began. I just did, Jae-hyun said. He walked out. Jisoo's office building was 12 minutes from the compound by car. Park drove. Jae-hyun sat in the back and looked at his hands and did not think about what they've been removed meant in practical terms, because thinking about it before he could see it would not help anything. The building's lobby had a cracked glass panel near the door. New. Jae-hyun saw it as he walked in and felt his jaw tighten. Jisoo's office was on the 3rd floor. The stairwell smelled like old carpet, and the fluorescent light on the 2nd floor landing was flickering in the way it had probably been flickering for weeks without anyone fixing it. Park's secondary contact was outside the office door, which was open. Inside, Jisoo was at her desk with a cloth pressed to her lip. She was upright, functional, her eyes clear and very angry. 2 of Seo's men, Jae-hyun recognized them both, building security contracted through one of the organization's legitimate subsidiaries, were seated against the far wall with the settled, careful posture of men who have been told to sit there and stay there by someone whose instruction it would be inadvisable to ignore. Park stood between them and the rest of the room with his arms crossed and his face doing nothing, and Amara was standing at the window. She turned when Jae-hyun came in. She had a red mark across her left cheekbone. Not a bruise yet. The bruise would come later, when the blood settled. But the mark of impact, clear and specific, and looking at it did something to Jae-hyun's chest that he would not have been able to accurately describe if asked. I'm fine, she said, before he could speak. Her voice was steady. They grabbed my bag when I came through the door. Tried to take the folder. Park arrived before it got further than that. He crossed the room. He stopped in front of her and looked at her face. The mark, her eyes, which were holding it together through what he recognized as will rather than calm. And he reached out and put his hand against her jaw, very carefully, on the unmarked side. I'm fine, she said again. Her voice stayed steady, but her jaw moved slightly under his hand, pressing back, just slightly, just enough. He turned. He looked at the 2 men against the wall. Get out, he said. Park stepped aside. The 2 men stood and left, and the quality of the room changed when they were gone. They came to take the documents, Jisoo said from behind her cloth. There were copies on my external drive. They took the drive. She looked at Jae-hyun with the level fury of a woman who has had her work physically taken from her and is still functional because she is that kind of woman. They don't have everything. I had 2 additional off-site backups they didn't know about. Where? Jae-hyun said. I'm not telling you in a room where two of your security contractors just sat against my wall, Jisoo said. No offense. None taken, he said. Can you get to them? Yes, she said. Do it, he said. And then get out of this office, today. Jisoo looked at Amara. Some kind of wordless communication happened between them. Fine, Jisoo said. Well, in the car on the way back, Amara sat beside him in the back seat and looked out the window, and he sat beside her and looked at the back of Park's head, and neither of them spoke for the first 3 minutes. Then she said, He's going to come at us differently now. Yes, he said. The documents are still secure. Yes. But he knows that, and he's going to move before we can use them formally. Yes, he said. He's going to call a formal council vote on the motion to remove you. He has the numbers, or he thinks he does. He paused. Director Han is the variable. If she votes with him, the motion passes, and I'm bound by protocol. And if she doesn't? Then it's split. A split council motion fails by default. He looked at his hands. I need to speak to her before Seo does. Then go speak to her, Amar said. I'm taking you back to the penthouse first. You're not... She stopped. She turned and looked at him fully for the first time since the car started moving. Jae-hyun, every minute you spend managing my location is a minute he's spending on Director Han. He looked back at her. The red mark on her cheekbone was starting to deepen at the edges. I'm aware, he said. Then go, she said. Park can take me to the penthouse. Go find Director Han. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Lock the door, he said. Don't open it for anyone except Park or me. I know how locks work, she said. He told Park to stop the car. Okay. He found Director Han in the compound's secondary meeting room, which she had apparently claimed after the council meeting broke. She was at the table with the documents spread in front of her and her reading glasses on, which told him she had not stopped working through the files since the recess. She looked up when he came in. Sit down, she said. He sat. She took her glasses off. Your uncle is going to call an emergency council session this evening, she said. He already messaged 3 members. He wants the formal vote tonight. I know. He'll frame the morning as an attempt by you to manipulate the council using documents of contested provenance, she said. He has a prepared statement. He showed it to council member Oh an hour ago. Oh told me. Oh told you, Jae-hyun said. Oh and I have worked together for 19 years, she said. He doesn't agree with your uncle's current trajectory, but he won't move against him without a stronger reason. She looked at Jae-hyun. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand exactly what you're working with. What do you need from me? He asked. The January 2000 memo, she said. I need the original, not a certified copy, the original document. The original is in the organizational archive. I know where it is, she said. I also know that Seo will move to have it reclassified by end of business today, which will take it out of general archive access and make it accessible only to senior council members, with his authorization. She folded her hands. You have approximately 4 hours before that reclassification goes through. Jae-hyun calculated. The archive is accessed through the compound's records office. Yes, she said. And the records office requires 2 senior signatures to access pre-2005 documents classified as internal council communications. She looked at him steadily. Mine is 1. I've already signed the request. It's waiting for a second signature. Why are you doing this? He said. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the document in front of her. The memo, his uncle's signature, those 3 words, characterized going forward. I have worked for this family for 23 years, she said. I have been loyal because the Kong family, in my experience, operated by a particular code. Not perfect, not clean, but internally consistent. She looked at him. What I'm looking at in this document is not consistent with that code. It is consistent with a man who decided his judgment superseded the truth, and who has been making that decision for 30 years without being checked. She picked up the document. I check things. It's what I do. And this needs to be checked. Jae-hyun stood. Where do I sign? He said. The archive retrieval took 40 minutes. The original memo was found in a physical folder in the pre-2005 Council Communications section, exactly where the archive index said it would be. Undisturbed apparently for 25 years, which was either a mark of Seo's confidence that it would never be looked for, or of the organization's administrative thoroughness, or both. Director Han photographed every page with a scanner that produced court-quality digital copies. She signed and dated the retrieval record. She was methodical and unhurried in a way that Jae-hyun found almost surreal, given the 4-hour window and the evening council session bearing down on them. "You don't seem afraid," he said. "I'm 61 years old," she said without looking up from the scanner. "I have 3 grandchildren and a house in Bundang, and I sleep well. Men like your uncle are afraid of people like me because I don't need anything from them." The retrieval record was logged at 2:47 in the afternoon. At 3:15, Jae-hyun got a text from Seo. "The evening session is confirmed for 7 o'clock. I hope you'll come prepared to support the council's decision." He showed it to Director Han. She looked at it. "He doesn't know about the archive retrieval yet," she said. "When he finds out, he'll move the session earlier." "Then we move first," Jae-hyun said. Booked. At 4 o'clock, Jae-hyun sent a message to every council member, not through the organizational communication system, through personal contacts, direct numbers, the kind of channels that existed outside the monitoring structure of the organization's internal network. The message contained 2 attachments: the certified copy of the 2000 memo and the scanned original, retrieved and dated less than 2 hours ago. The message was 7 sentences long. It stated what the documents were, where they had been found, who had retrieved them, and when. It made no argument. It drew no conclusions. It let the documents speak. The replies came back in sequence over the next 40 minutes. Council member O replied first, "I'll be at the session." 3 others replied within 20 minutes. Variations of the same. "Acknowledged. I'll attend." 1 replied, "This changes things." Director Han read the replies over his shoulder at the compound's secondary meeting room, which had become, over the course of the afternoon, an unofficial war room. 6 of 9, she said. "He needs a majority. With 6 attending who've seen the original document, even if 3 vote with him, the motion fails." "He'll challenge the retrieval," Jae-hyun said. "He'll say I had no authority." "You had my authority and yours," she said. "That's the required 2 signatures for pre-2005 council communications. It's procedurally clean." She looked at him. "Your uncle is very good at working around procedure. He's less good when someone follows procedure precisely." Jae-hyun's phone rang. It was Amara. "Turn on the news," she said. "Right now. Any channel." The news was on Director Han's phone 30 seconds later. The story, attributed to an anonymous source close to the Kong family, which meant it had been placed deliberately and recently, described an ongoing internal dispute within a prominent Seoul business family over a foreign national who had allegedly gained access to sensitive business information under false pretenses. No names were used. The framing was careful, legally, but the details were specific enough that anyone familiar with the organization would know exactly who and what was being described. SEO had gone to the press, not the criminal press, not the tabloid press, a business news outlet, respectable, the kind of outlet whose stories got picked up by financial publications, the kind of coverage that didn't destroy people directly but created enough ambient smoke that the question of fire became unavoidable. Director Han set the phone down. "He's trying to make the council vote irrelevant," she said. "If the story is already in the press, the organization's response becomes about managing the external narrative, not the internal documents." "He's sacrificing the confidentiality of the family's internal affairs to save himself," Jae-hyun said. "Yes," she said, "which tells you how afraid he is." Jae-hyun called Amara back. "Are you all right?" he said. "I'm fine," she said. "But Jae-hyun, he's named a source. The article says a woman close to the family who is currently under review. They're talking about me without naming me." Her voice was steady but tighter than it had been that morning. "If they name me, my scholarship, my enrollment, my brothers, they won't name you," he said. "That crosses a legal line they won't cross without confirmation. And no one inside this organization is going to confirm, because the people who know your name also know what I'm about to present tonight." "Are you sure about that?" He wasn't. He was running calculations that involved significant uncertainty at almost every point. "I'm handling it," he said. "That's not an answer." "It's what I have right now," he said. "I need 2 more hours. Can you hold 2 more hours?" A pause. "Yes," she said. "But Jae-hyun." "I know," he said. "I know. 2 hours." He hung up. He looked at Director Han. "The session," he said. "I need it moved up to 6 o'clock. Seo won't agree." "Then I call it without his agreement," Jae-hyun said. "I'm the heir. I have the authority to call a council session with 4 hours' notice. I don't need his consent to set the time." Director Han looked at him for a long moment. "All right," she said. The council session at 6 o'clock had 9 members present, which was unusual for a session called at 2 hours' notice, and told Jae-hyun that the morning's materials had landed with more weight than CO had accounted for. SEO arrived at 5:58. He saw the room, the attendance, the positioning, the fact that Director Han was seated 2 chairs from the head of the table rather than at her usual end, and something behind his eyes adjusted. He sat down. He looked at Jae-hyun. "You moved the session," he said. "Yes," Jae-hyun said, "without consultation." "Within my authority," Jae-hyun said, "as you know." A pause. Seo looked around the table. He was reading attendance, reading positions, doing the same calculation Jae-hyun had been doing since 4 o'clock. "The morning meeting was incomplete," Jae-hyun said to the full table. "I want to complete it now, with all members present, before any formal vote is taken on any motion." He looked at Seo. "And I want to address the news article that appeared this afternoon." "I know nothing about a news article," Seo said. "Then this will be informative," Jae-hyun said. He stood. He walked through it again, faster this time, the summary version, because these 9 people had already seen the documents, and the ones who needed more time had had the afternoon to take it. He addressed the press article directly and without theater. Someone inside the organization had provided details of a private internal dispute to a business outlet. He did not accuse Seo by name. He stated that this constituted a breach of the organizational confidentiality protocols that every council member had signed. He stated that whoever had made that call would be identified. He looked at Seo when he said it. The room was very quiet. "The motion before this council," Seo said when Jae-hyun sat, "is the removal of Miss Bennett from the family's inner circle on grounds of security risk. That motion stands regardless of what documents are presented, because the question of security risk is a judgment call, not a factual determination. Judgment calls," Director Han said, "are based on evidence. The evidence that formed the basis of your motion, the characterization of David Bennett's conduct, has been significantly complicated by today's archive retrieval." She looked at the table. "I move that the original motion be tabled pending a full review of the 2000 council records." "Seconded," said Council Member O. SEO looked at O. O looked back. 20 years of alliance, 20 years of deference, and O looked back at Seo and did not look away. "All in favor of tabling," Director Han said. 6 hands. Seo's 2 allies did not raise theirs. SEO did not raise his. The 9th member, the eldest, a man who had been on the council since Jae-hyun's father's time, raised his hand last, slowly, without looking at anyone. 6-3. The motion was tabled. The room emptied with the controlled efficiency of people who understood that what had just happened was significant and that processing it publicly in the hallway of the compound was inadvisable. Handshakes and nods and careful neutrality, and within 10 minutes only Jae-hyun and Seo remained at the table. Seo did not leave. He sat with his hands folded and looked at the table for a long moment after the last council member's footsteps had faded down the hall. Then he looked at Jae-hyun. "You understand," Seo said, "that tabling is not the same as a verdict." "I know that," Jae-hyun said. "The review will take months. During that time, the organization will be unstable. Alliances will shift. External parties will sense the instability, and I know all of this," Jae-hyun said. "And you're willing to accept it." Seo's voice was not angry. It was the voice of a man genuinely trying to understand a calculation he had gotten wrong. "For her." "It's not for her," Jae-hyun said. "It's for the truth. Those are different things." "In this world," Seo said, "they are the same thing. Both are luxuries." "Then I'll afford them," Jae-hyun said, "differently than you did." Seo looked at him for a long time. The warmth that was his instrument had gone completely now, and what was underneath it was simply age. The exhaustion of a man who had spent 30 years being certain he was right about everything, who was now sitting in a room where the certainty had cost him something measurable. "Your father," Seo said, "would not have made this choice." "I know," Jae-hyun said. "My father trusted you." Seo was quiet. "Get out of this room," Jae-hyun said, "and retain an attorney, not Lee Sung-woo, someone outside the organization. Are you— I'm telling you to prepare," Jae-hyun said, "because what's in those documents is going to go to the Financial Review Board. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but it's going. I'm giving you time to arrange your affairs because you were my father's brother and he loved you, and that means something to me even now." He looked at his uncle. "But it doesn't mean more than the truth." Seo stood. He adjusted his jacket. He picked up his briefcase. He walked to the door and stopped, his back to Jae-hyun. "She will cost you more than you think," he said. "Maybe," Jae-hyun said, "but what you cost us is already counted." Seo walked out. Jae-hyun sat alone at the long table in the room that smelled like old decisions, and he pressed both hands flat against the wood, and he breathed, once, twice, a third time. And he thought about how quiet a room gets when the thing you've been fighting toward is finally, provisionally, done. His phone was in his hand before he finished the thought. He called Amara. She picked up on the first ring. "It's done," he said. A silence. Then, "How done?" "The motion is tabled. He's still standing, but he's not—" He stopped. "He doesn't have the room anymore." Another silence. He heard her exhale, and it was the exhale of someone who has been holding something for a very long time. "Come home," she said. The word landed in him the same way it had landed in her weeks ago, when Park had relayed it, with weight, with implication, with the particular resonance of a word used in a context where its meaning had quietly expanded beyond its definition. "I'm coming," he said. He stood. He put on his jacket. He walked down the hall of the compound where he had grown up, past the walls and the curtained windows, and the accumulated history of a family that had built itself on power and was now, perhaps just beginning, to understand the cost of what it had built. He walked out of the compound into the cold Seoul evening. He got into the car. He told Park to drive. And in his chest, beneath the exhaustion and the residue of controlled adrenaline and the awareness that the review board and the months ahead were still coming, beneath all of it, something that had been locked for a very long time had moved. Not opened. Not yet. But moved. He was 15 minutes from the penthouse when his phone rang again. Not Amara. An unknown number. He answered. The voice on the other end was a man's, unfamiliar, clipped, speaking Korean with a northeastern accent. "Mr. Kang," the voice said. "My name is Investigator Choi. I'm with the Financial Intelligence Supervisory Board." A pause. "We have been contacted regarding the 1999 report submitted to this office by an individual in connection with Minguk Trading." Another pause. "The contact came from an external source this afternoon, along with certified copies of several council documents." A pause. "We would like to speak with you, tonight, if possible." The car moved through Seoul. Jae-hyun looked at the city through the window. Ji-soo. She had sent the documents to the Financial Intelligence Board directly, as a failsafe, which meant Amara had asked her to, probably last night, probably while he was sleeping for 2 hours and she was sitting at the table not sleeping, building contingencies he hadn't known about. She had done it herself. She had been moving pieces on a board he hadn't fully seen, and now the board was entirely different. "Yes," he said into the phone. "Tonight, name the location." He texted Amara one line. "The Financial Intelligence Board has the documents. They called me. This is going to move faster than I thought. Stay at the penthouse." Her reply came back in 40 seconds. "I know, I asked Jisoo to send them last night. I should have told you." He stared at the message. Then he typed, "Yes, you should have." A pause. Then, "Are you angry?" He looked out the window. The city moved past. He thought about a woman at 2 a.m. building contingencies at a table while he slept, because she had learned, from her father, from her life, from the specific education of being someone who has never had the luxury of trusting that the ground would hold, that you don't count on a single point of support. "No," he typed, "but we are going to talk about this." Her reply, "Yes, we are. Come home first." He put the phone in his pocket. Park glanced at the mirror. "Where to, sir?" "Change of plan," Jae-hyun said. "Take me to the supervisory board offices on Sejongdaero first." He paused. "And then home." Park nodded. The car turned. And behind them, in the compound on the hill, a man who had spent 31 years being certain that the ground beneath him was solid, sat in an empty council room and understood, for the first time, that he had been building on something that was always going to give way, and that the question was never whether it would happen, but only who would be standing when it did. The Financial Intelligence Supervisory Board offices on Sejongdaero occupied the 14th floor of a building that had been designed to look permanent and immovable, which was the architectural language of institutions that wanted you to understand, before you walked through the door, that they had been here longer than you and would be here after you were gone. The lobby had marble floors and the particular silence of spaces where sound was considered a distraction from seriousness. Jae-hyun arrived at 8:47 in the evening, Investigator Choi was younger than his voice, mid-40s, compact, the kind of man who had learned to take up exactly the space he needed and no more. He had two colleagues with him, both with the careful, neutral expressions of people trained to observe without telegraphing what they were observing. The meeting room was small and fluorescent and had a recorder on the table that Choi switched on without asking permission, which was its own kind of message. "We received the documents at 4:17 this afternoon," Choi said, "from an external research consultant. The covering letter cited the original 1999 report, which exists in our archive, confirmed, and requested that we review it in conjunction with the new material." He opened a folder. The 1999 report was received by this office and logged. It was then referred upward to the Senior Oversight Division. He looked at Jae-hyun, where it was closed without action. The supervising officer who closed it retired in 2003. He is deceased. "So the cover-up ran deeper than the organization," Jae-hyun said. "We don't know that yet," Choi said carefully. "What we know is that a report was received and not acted on. The reason for that will be part of our review." He folded his hands. "Mr. Kong, I want to be direct with you. The documents submitted this afternoon, if they are authenticated, and preliminary review suggests they are, describe a significant ongoing financial crime that has been operating inside your family's organization for decades." A pause. "We will be opening a formal investigation. You are not currently a subject of that investigation, but your cooperation will determine whether that changes." "I'll cooperate fully," Jae-hyun said. Choi looked at him. "Your uncle is a subject." "I know. Other council members may be named as the review progresses." "I understand." "And the organization itself," Choi paused. "The legitimate subsidiaries may face review. Asset freezes are a possibility during investigation." Jae-hyun sat with that. Asset freezes meant the trading companies, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios that were clean, built clean, maintained clean, the portion of the organization that he had been slowly expanding at the expense of the other kind of business for the past 4 years. Asset freezes meant employees who had nothing to do with a 1999 cover-up sitting at home waiting. "How long?" he said. "The investigation itself, months, possibly longer. The freeze, if ordered, could be lifted in stages as assets are cleared." Choi looked at him steadily. "The fastest path through this is full cooperation and full documentation." "You'll have everything I have," Jae-hyun said. "Everything." Choi nodded once. "We'll need a full interview, tomorrow morning, if possible, with counsel present." "I'll be here at 9, Jae-hyun said. He took a card. He shook hands. He rode the elevator down 14 floors alone and walked out of the building into the cold of a Seoul night that felt different from the cold of every other Seoul night he could remember. Not colder, not warmer, just different in the specific way that air feels different when something that has been sealed for a long time has finally been opened. He stood on the pavement for a moment. Then he got in the car and went home. Amara was awake when he came in. She was sitting on the floor of the living room with her back against the sofa and her knees drawn up and a cup of tea on the floor beside her that had gone cold an hour ago. She looked up when the door opened. He came in. He took off his jacket. He sat down on the floor beside her, his back against the sofa, the two of them side by side in the half-dark of the living room, with Seoul glittering through the glass walls in every direction. He told her everything. The interview, Choi. The investigation timeline. The asset freeze possibility. He told it straight, no editorializing, the way he told everything. The facts in sequence. The implications following the facts. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "I should have told you about the financial board," she said, "before I asked Jisoo to send the documents." "Yes," he said. "I made a unilateral decision about something that affected you directly," she said, "without giving you the information you needed to prepare." "Yes," he said. "Why?" She was quiet. She turned the cold teacup on the floor without picking it up. "Because I wasn't sure you would do it," she said. "If I told you first, I wasn't sure you would choose the version of this that involves a financial intelligence investigation and asset freezes and months of your life in review." She looked at him. "And I needed it done. For my father. For the truth of what he was. I needed it in the hands of someone who couldn't be bought or pressured by your uncle." She paused. "So I did it, and I was going to tell you, and I know that's not—" "You didn't trust me," he said. The words were flat. Not angry, just exact. She held his gaze. "Not completely. No." The living room was very quiet. That's honest, he said. I'm trying to be, she said. He leaned his head back against the sofa cushion and looked at the ceiling. I didn't trust you either, he said. At the family meeting, I asked for time because I was afraid of what choosing you in that room would cost. And I told myself it was strategy and it wasn't. It was fear. He looked at the ceiling. And you knew that. You knew it immediately. Yes, she said. So we're even, he said. She considered that. Not even, but comparable. He almost laughed. Not quite. Close. They sat in the half-dark for a long time without either of them needing to fill it. Outside, the city moved and lit and hummed. Inside, two people who had been circling something for months sat on the floor of a penthouse and let the circling stop. When this is over, she said eventually, the investigation, the review, the restructuring of whatever's left, what do you want to build? He thought about it. Something that doesn't need to be hidden, he said. Something that can say what it is out loud. He paused. You said once that Korean manufacturing paired with East African distribution could work, that the fundamentals were there and the relationships were underdeveloped. I did say that, she said. I'd like to build that, he said. If you're... He stopped. If I'm what? She said. He turned his head and looked at her. If you're willing to be part of building it, not as an arrangement, not as anything with a contract and a set of terms. He held her gaze. As what this actually is. She looked back at him. What is it? She said. Something I don't have a controlled word for, he said, which should tell you something given that I have a controlled word for everything. She held his gaze for another moment. Then she picked up the cold tea and drank what was left of it and made a face. That's terrible, she said. I know, he said. I watched you make it 2 hours ago. You were home 2 hours ago? No, he said. I meant I know your tea-making habits well enough to know it would be terrible by now. She set the cup down. Jae-hyun. Yes. I'm going to finish my degree, she said. I'm not stopping for anything. I know. And when I have an opinion about a business decision, I'm going to say it. I would be alarmed if you didn't. And I'm going to send money home every month and visit Kofi when I can and call my mother every Sunday, even when it runs long. Good, he said. And I'm not going to be managed, she said. Not by you, not by anyone in your world, not by anyone who thinks my presence here is conditional on being convenient. I know all of this, he said. I know you know it, she said. I'm saying it out loud so we both hear it. All right, he said. All right, she said. They sat on the floor. The city glittered. Neither of them moved. And neither of them moved because there was nowhere else to be. CO Minkyu was formally notified of the investigation 9 days later. He received the notification at the compound in his personal office, delivered by a Financial Intelligence Supervisory Board officer, accompanied by 2 additional investigators, and a document that enumerated the specific allegations against him in the dry and exact language of official institutions. A language that does not raise its voice because it does not need to, because the weight of what it says is carried by the specificity of what it names rather than the volume with which it names it. Chae-hyun was not present for that notification. He had been told the day before that it was coming. He had spent that morning at the compound walking through the rooms he had grown up in. Not sentimentally, not looking for something, but doing the thing he had always done when he needed to think, which was to move through the physical space of his own history and let it remind him of what had actually been there versus what he had constructed around it. The hallway where he had paced at 8 years old, his grandmother's kitchen where the broth had always been slightly burnt, the council room where his father had sat, trusting the wrong man, never knowing it. He stood in the council room for 10 minutes. He thought about his father. Then he walked out and called Director Han. The legitimization process, he said. The transition from the old structure to the registered trade operations. I need to move faster than originally planned. Because of the freeze risk, she said. Because it's the right time, he said. While the investigation is moving, while the old alliances are disrupted and the council is recalibrating, this is the window. If I don't move through it now, there won't be a cleaner one. A pause. You'll lose some of the council. I know. The ones who can't make the transition, who are too deeply connected to the old operations to be part of a legitimate structure. I know, he said. You're willing to let that piece go. Yes, he said. That piece was always going to go. I've known that for 4 years. I was building toward it slowly because I thought slow was safer. He paused. It isn't. Slow just gives the opposition time to organize. Director Han was quiet for a moment. I'll draw up the transition framework. It'll take the rest of the week. I'll be available, he said. He stood in the compound's courtyard after he hung up, in the cold of a late autumn morning, and he thought about what it meant to walk away from the version of something you inherited and build a different version in its place. Whether that was courage or arrogance or some mixture of both that couldn't be cleanly separated. He didn't reach a conclusion. He suspected he wouldn't, and that the not knowing was part of it. The not knowing was what made the choice real rather than calculated. He drove to the penthouse. Amara was at the table with her laptop and 3 books open and a notebook covered in her handwriting, which was small and dense and moved across the page with the urgency of someone who was always slightly racing ahead of the thought she was trying to capture. She looked up when he came in. "How was the compound?" she said. "Quiet," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Are you all right?" He sat down across from her at the table. "I'm going to restructure the organization," he said. "Full legitimization. The council members who can't make the transition, I'll be buying them out where I can, separating where I can't." She set her pen down. "That's a significant loss," she said. "Yes. What's left on the other side of it?" "The trading companies, the real estate holdings, 2 investment funds that have always been clean," he paused, "and room to build what I said I wanted to build." She held his gaze. "You're serious?" "I have never said anything to you that I wasn't serious about," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned her laptop around to face him. On the screen was a spreadsheet. Her spreadsheet. He could tell by the color coding and the column headers, which used her notation system, covering preliminary market analysis for a Korean East African trade corridor, port data, regulatory timelines, infrastructure gaps, partnership opportunities broken into columns by sector. "I started this 6 weeks ago," she said, "when I realized you were actually going to do what you said you were going to do." He looked at the screen. He read it thoroughly, which took 3 minutes, during which she sat across from him and let him read. "This is good," he said. "I know," she said. "The Mombasa corridor projection is conservative." "I was being careful," she said. "The conservative number is still viable. The aggressive number is what we build toward." He looked up from the screen. "We," he said. She looked back. "We." He turned the laptop back around. "Finish your degree first," he said. "Then we build." "I can do both," she said. "I know you can," he said. "I'm asking you not to, because what you're building academically is the foundation of your credibility in every room we're going to walk into, and I want it finished before we start making noise." He paused. "That's not me managing you. That's me making an argument." She considered it. "How long is your restructuring going to take?" "A year, possibly 18 months. "My degree is done in 11 months, she said. "Then we have a schedule," he said. She picked up her pen. "Yes," she said. "We do." Madeline Kong had a second cardiac event in December, smaller than the first, caught early because Jae-hyun had insisted on monthly cardiac monitoring after the subway station incident, and the monitoring system had flagged an irregularity before she felt anything. She was hospitalized for 4 days. She came home with adjusted medication and a new list of dietary restrictions that she ignored selectively and in sequence, beginning with the salt restriction, which she found personally offensive. Amara spent 3 days at the hospital and did not tell anyone she was doing it, because she knew that if she told Jaehyun, he would tell Madeline, and Madeline would insist it wasn't necessary, and she would have to spend energy managing Madeline's insistence rather than simply being there. On the 3rd day, Madeline opened her eyes from a nap and found Amara reading in the chair beside the bed. "You're still here," Madeline said. "I have reading to do," Amara said. "Anywhere works." Madeline looked at her. In the particular way Madeline looked at things she was deciding to address directly. "You love him," she said. Amara kept her eyes on her book. "Grandmother Kang, you don't have to confirm it," Madeline said. "I'm not asking. I'm telling you what I can see, which is something I've earned the right to do by living as long as I have." She adjusted the blanket on her lap. "He loves you too. He's been trying to find a word for it that doesn't frighten him, which is taking longer than it should." Amara finally looked up from the book. "He'll find it," Madeline said. "He's thorough. He just needs time." "I know," Amara said. Madeline reached out and put her hand on Amara's, her grip firm, papery, warm. "My husband," Madeline said, "was not a good man. It was not a bad one either. He was a man shaped by what his world required him to be. and he shaped the organization accordingly, and my son after him, and now Jae-hyun. She paused. But Jae-hyun is the first one who has wanted something different. He's wanted it for years. He just needed... She stopped. Needed what? Amara said. A reason that was bigger than the fear, Madeline said. She looked at their joined hands. You are a very good reason. Amara's throat did something inconvenient. Don't tell him I said that, Madeline said. He'll make a face. Amara laughed, short and real. I won't tell him. Good. Madeline patted her hand once and withdrew. Now read to me, whatever you have. I don't care what it is. Amara looked at her book. It was a market analysis of East African port infrastructure. She looked at Madeline. It's not a novel, she said. Read it anyway, Madeline said. I've lived a long life. I can manage a port analysis. Amara read. Madeline listened with her eyes closed and a small smile that she probably didn't know she was wearing. What? CO Min-Kyu entered a formal cooperation agreement with the Financial Intelligence Supervisory Board in February, 7 weeks after the investigation opened. The cooperation agreement meant he provided full documentation of the Minguk trading structure, the fund routing, the 2000 cover-up mechanism, and the names of 3 external officials who had been compensated to ensure the 1999 report was closed without action. In exchange, the agreement reduced his personal criminal exposure and provided a path to a formal settlement. He was removed from the Kang Organization Council by unanimous vote on the day the cooperation agreement was announced. He did not contest the removal. Jae-hyun received the notification of the council vote from Director Han by text message. He was in a meeting with an infrastructure investment firm when the message came through. He read it, set the phone face down on the table, and continued the meeting. He told Amara that evening. She was cooking, actually cooking, a full meal, something she did on evenings when she had the time and the energy, filling the kitchen with smells that had nothing to do with Seoul and everything to do with a kitchen in Nairobi, where she had learned to cook from a woman who believed food was the language of everything important. He came through the door and she could tell from the way he moved that something had settled. Theo, she said. Not a question. Removed from council, he said. Unanimously. She stirred the pot. Are you? She started. Fine, he said. Then, not fine, but resolved. He came into the kitchen and stood beside her and looked at what was on the stove. That's Sukuma Wiki. She looked at him, surprised. You know what that is? I looked it up, he said, after the 3rd time you made it. She looked at the pot. She looked at him. There's enough for 2, she said. I know, he said. He opened the cabinet and took down 2 plates without being asked. They ate at the table in the kitchen, which had become where they ate when it was just the 2 of them. Not the dining room, which was formal and proportioned for company, but the kitchen table, which was smaller and better lit and had the feel of a space that was actually inhabited rather than maintained. My brother's surgery is scheduled for the 18th, she said. I know, he said. You told me on Tuesday. I'm going home for it, she said. 2 weeks in Nairobi. I know, he said. I cleared my schedule. She looked at him. I'm coming with you, he said. If you want. She was quiet for a moment. You want to come to Nairobi? I want to meet Kofi, he said, and your mother, and whoever else is important to you there. He looked at his plate. I'm building something with you. I'd like to understand the whole shape of what I'm building with. She set her fork down. Jae-hyun, she said. He looked up. You know this is real, she said. What we are, you know that. Yes, he said. You don't need to perform things to prove it. Coming to Nairobi, you don't have to do that for me. I know, he said. I want to. She held his gaze. He held hers. My mother is going to ask you very direct questions, she said. I'd expect nothing less, he said, from the woman who raised you. Something in her chest moved the way things move when they've been held in one position for a long time and are finally allowed to shift. All right, she said. You can come. He nodded once. He picked up his fork. The Sukuma Wiki is very good, he said. I know, she said. He almost smiled. Kofi Bennett was 22 and had his sister's eyes and his father's specific quality of attention, the kind that made you feel that whatever you were saying was the only thing in the room worth listening to. He was thinner than the photographs Amara had shown Jae-hyun, the weight of 8 months of illness visible in the lines of his face and the careful way he moved, conserving energy with the practiced economy of someone who had learned what it cost to spend it carelessly. He was also, very clearly, deeply funny in the way Amara had described, the way that didn't know it was funny, that found the absurd edge of things without trying, that made the people around him laugh before they understood why. He met Jae-hyun in the hospital room 2 days before the surgery, where he was sitting up in bed with a textbook open across his knees and an expression of mild exasperation that suggested the textbook had been failing to hold his interest for some time. "So you're the Korean mob boss who's in love with my sister," Kofi said. "Kofi," Amara said. "What?" "She told me the relevant facts." "She told you." Amara turned to Jae-hyun with an expression that was equal parts apology and very thinly concealed amusement. "She told him the relevant facts." Jae-hyun looked at Kofi. "The organization is in transition," he said. "The characterization of mob boss is becoming less accurate." "Becoming," Kofi said. "Good word choice." "Thank you," Jae-hyun said. "I thought so." Kofi looked at him for a long moment with the assessing directness of someone who has spent 8 months with a particular kind of clarity about what matters and what doesn't. "She's good," Kofi said. "My sister. She's the best person I know, and I'm not saying that because she's my sister. I'm saying it because it's accurate." He held Jae-hyun's gaze. "If you make her smaller, if you let your world make her smaller, I will find out, and I won't do anything dramatic because I'm not that kind of person, but I will be disappointed in you. And you seem like someone who finds disappointment worse than dramatic." Jae-hyun looked at him. "Yes," he said. "I do." "Good," Kofi said. He looked back at his textbook. "Sit down." "Amara, there's water in the jug if he wants water." Amara sat down in the chair beside the bed and looked at her brother with the expression of someone who has been terrified for 8 months and is sitting next to the reason and still being terrified, but also, for the first time, something else. Jae-hyun pulled a second chair from the corner and sat. They stayed for 2 hours. At some point, Kofi fell asleep mid-sentence, the way people do when they are very tired and very comfortable, and Amara reached over and straightened his textbook so it wouldn't fall, and the gesture was so automatic, so entirely unself-conscious, so nakedly loving in the way of people who have loved someone since before they could remember. Jae-hyun watched it happen and felt something in him that he had spent a very long time telling himself was not what it was finally, be exactly what it was. He did not say anything. He handed her the blanket from the foot of the bed. She took it and covered her brother. They sat in the quiet of the hospital room, and outside the window Nairobi was warm and loud and entirely unlike Seoul, and neither of them needed the silence to be anything other than what it was. Kofi's surgery lasted 6 hours. Jae-hyun sat in the surgical waiting room with Amara's mother, Grace Bennett, who was a small woman with an enormous and unhurried quality of presence, the kind that made a plastic hospital chair look chosen. She had welcomed Jae-hyun into her home 2 days before with the matter-of-fact warmth of a woman who has already decided you are who you appear to be and is simply confirming it. She asked him questions about his family and listened to his answers with the same quality of attention she had given everything else, total, patient, missing nothing. She had not asked him about the organization. She had asked him about his grandmother. He had told her about the burnt broth, without planning to, and Grace had laughed the same way Amara laughed, short and real and entirely unguarded, and looked at him with an expression that told him the evaluation had just shifted significantly in his favor. In the waiting room, she knitted. He did not knit. He sat beside her and read something on his phone, and when she spoke, he put the phone down. "Amara's father," Grace said at the 4-hour mark, not looking up from her knitting. He would not have believed this, that his daughter would be sitting in this city, in a hospital chair, waiting for... She stopped, started again. He would have believed it, actually. He always said Amara was going to go further than any of us could follow. A pause. He meant it as pride, not distance. "She's told me about him," Jae-hyun said. "She keeps his contact book," Grace said, "from when he died. She doesn't look at it. She just keeps it." She continued knitting. "Whatever happened in Seoul 25 years ago, whatever he was involved in, he came home. He came home and he never talked about it, and he built something good here." She looked at Jae-hyun over her knitting. "A man who comes home and builds something good, that tells you most of what you need to know." "I think so too," Jae-hyun said. She looked at him for a moment. "You're going to make my daughter's life complicated," she said. "Yes," he said, "and you're going to be worth it." He held her gaze. "I intend to be." She nodded once and went back to her knitting. At the 6-hour mark, the surgeon came out. The surgery had gone well. Kofi was in recovery. He would need weeks of rehabilitation and monitoring, but the structural issue had been corrected and his prognosis was good, which was the word the surgeon used, good, and which landed in Amara with a physical force, a full-body release, the kind that happens when the tension you've been carrying has been there so long you stopped recognizing it as tension and started calling it yourself. She sat down in the waiting room chair and pressed both hands over her face. Grace sat beside her and put one arm around her shoulders. Chae-hyun sat on her other side and said nothing, because there was nothing that needed to be said, and he knew that, and he put his hand on the back of her chair. Not on her, not yet, just there, present, a point of reference. And he stayed. After a while, she lowered her hands. She looked at the ceiling. Okay, she said. Okay, Grace said. Amara turned and looked at Jae-hyun. He looked back. Thank you, she said, for being here. I wanted to be, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder, which was not something she had done before. This precise gesture, this direction of lean. And he stayed very still, the way you stay still when something has landed that you don't want to disturb. Grace said nothing. She continued knitting. Her needles made a quiet, steady sound in the waiting room. They stayed in Nairobi for 10 days after the surgery. Kofi was moved out of the ICU on the 3rd day into a regular ward, then into a rehabilitation facility that was comfortable and competently staffed. And by the 8th day, he was sitting up and arguing with Amara about her thesis methodology, which she took as the clearest possible evidence of recovery. Chae-hyun spent the days alternating between the hospital, Grace's house, and several meetings with regional trade contacts that Amara had arranged in advance, deliberately, because she had understood that bringing him here was not only about her family, but about making the thing they were building real in both directions. The meetings were productive. One of the port contacts became a genuine lead. A regulatory conversation that was supposed to last an hour lasted 3 and ended with a handshake and a follow-up scheduled for the spring. On the 9th evening, he sat with Amara on the back steps of Grace's house in the warm dark of a Nairobi night that smelled like rain coming, and he told her about the meetings. She listened. She asked questions, sharp, specific, the questions of someone who already knows the territory and is checking whether he navigated it correctly. He had. Mostly. The Mombasa contact, she said. Did you mention the cold chain infrastructure gap? Yes, he said. He's already working on it from the domestic side. He needs a partner with refrigerated shipping capacity. I know someone, she said, a Korean logistics firm. Small, family-owned, looking for East African routes. I've been corresponding with them for 3 months. Why didn't you mention them before? He said. Because 3 months ago you were still running a criminal organization, and I didn't know if we were actually going to build this, she said. He looked at her. We are, he said. I know, she said. That's why I'm mentioning them now. The rain that had been coming arrived, not dramatically, not all at once, but in the gentle incremental way of Nairobi rains, which build slowly and then are simply there, warm and steady and entirely committed. They didn't move from the steps. My uncle accepted the cooperation agreement, he said. That means the investigation moves faster. 18 months may become 12. And the organization? The restructure is on schedule, he said. Director Han is overseeing the transition framework. The council members who can't make the transition, 2 have already taken buyouts. 1 is contesting. He'll settle. He paused. What's left on the other side is legitimately small, but it's clean. Clean is worth more than large, she said. Yes, he said. I know that now. She looked at the rain. He looked at the rain. Beside them, the garden that Grace maintained with the same unhurried thoroughness she applied to everything was getting the water it needed. I want to say something, he said. She waited. At the family meeting, he said, when Seo asked what you were to me and I asked for time to review, he paused. I have never done anything I am more ashamed of. She was quiet. Not because of what it cost strategically, he said. Because of what it meant. What it said to you in front of those people. That your worth to me was conditional on what was convenient. That you were something to be managed rather than someone to be... He stopped. I spent years telling myself that controlled people were safe people. That if I kept everything at distance and managed every variable, no one could be taken from me the way... He stopped again. The way people had been taken. Who did you lose? She said. He was quiet for a moment. My father. A woman I thought I was going to marry when I was 29. She left. She said the life I was living would consume anyone who stayed in it. He paused. She was right. About the life. And I told myself it meant I was someone who should stay alone, that the controlled version was what I had instead. Amara listened. She did not fill the silence. You are the first person in years, he said, who has made the controlled version feel like a waste. The rain came steadily down. She looked at him. I know you're not going to be easy, she said. You're precise and you're private, and you have an organizational instinct that's going to conflict with my instinct about 90% of the time. Probably, he said, and I'm going to disagree with you loudly, in important rooms in front of people. I know. And I'm going to send money home and take calls from my mother on Sunday, even when we have plans. Good, he said. And I'm going to call you out when you're managing instead of feeling, she said. I'm not going to let that slide. I know, he said. I'm counting on it. She looked at him. The rain was in her hair. Neither of them had moved to go inside. This is real, she said. Not a question this time. Yes, he said. Say it properly, she said. He looked at her. The full, direct look, nothing held back, the one he used rarely because he had never before trusted what it would show if he let it. I love you, he said. That's the word I've been trying to find a controlled version of, and there isn't one. So that's what it is. She looked at him for a long moment in the Nairobi rain. Then she said, I know, I've known for a while. Of course you have, he said. I love you too, she said, in case you needed that said out loud. I did, he said. Yes. She leaned her head back against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. The rain came down. 1 year later, the Trade Corridor Partnership between Kong International Trade, registered, legitimate, publicly documented, and the East African Logistics Network, Amara, had helped architect was 6 months into its first operating phase. 3 port relationships, 1 cold chain pilot, 2 regulatory approvals pending in Nairobi and Mombasa. A team of 14 people split across Seoul and Nairobi, all of them aware of exactly what the company was and what it was building. Amara completed her degree on a Thursday afternoon in late spring, in a university hall that smelled like old wood and ceremony. And when they called her name, she walked across the stage and received the thing she had spent 4 years, an ocean, and a significant portion of herself working toward. Chae-Hyun was in the 4th row. Beside him was Madeline Kong, who had insisted on attending and whose cardiologist had cleared her for the trip, and who was wearing a hat she had purchased specifically for the occasion, which was navy and formal, and which she wore with the composure of a woman who has attended many important events and considers the calibration of hats to be a serious undertaking. Beside Madeline was Grace Bennett, who had flown in from Nairobi 2 days earlier and who had spent those 2 days cooking in the penthouse kitchen with Amara in a collaboration that had produced more food than 4 people could reasonably eat and that had smelled like every important thing from 2 separate childhoods layered into the same space. Beside Grace was Kofi, fully recovered, taller than Jaehyun had initially registered, wearing a suit jacket he had borrowed and shoes that fit him, and the specific expression of a brother watching his sister do something that was a long time coming. When Amara walked off the stage, she found all of them in the crowd by looking for Madeline's hat, which was visible from a significant distance. And she walked toward the hat, and then she was in the middle of all of them. Her mother's arms, her brother's height, Madeline's firm, papery grip. And she let herself be in the middle of it completely, without managing or measuring, just in it. Jae-Hyun stood at the edge of the group. She looked at him over her mother's shoulder. He looked back. He was not a man who performed things. He did not make gestures that he would have to maintain. He was simply standing there, in a university hall in Seoul, with the people she loved, looking at her the way he had been looking at her since the night on Grace's back steps in the Nairobi rain, fully, without the controlled distance, without the managed expression. She disentangled herself from the group and walked to him. He looked at her. Well done, he said. Thank you, she said. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small box, not presented dramatically, held out simply, the way he did things, without theater. She looked at the box. It's not a contract, he said. It's not an arrangement. It's not strategic, and it's not a solution to any problem. He paused. It's what I should have said a long time ago, when I first started wanting to say it. He looked at her. You do not have to say yes today. You do not have to say yes at all. But I want you to know that this is what I mean and what I have meant for some time, and I'm done finding controlled words for it. She opened the box. The ring inside was simple. A single stone. Exactly the kind of thing she would have chosen herself, which told her he had paid the right kind of attention. Around them, the hall buzzed with families and photographers and the ordinary beautiful noise of important days. Madeline was watching from 12 feet away with an expression that said she had known this was coming for considerably longer than anyone else had. Grace was watching with her hands clasped and her face doing everything it felt, which was a great deal. Kofi had taken out his phone. "Put the phone away," Amara said, without looking at him. "I'm just... Kofi." The phone went away. She looked at Jae-hyun. "You are precise and private and difficult," she said. "And you have a coat closet where everything faces the same direction, which I have never said anything about, but I'm saying it now." "I'm aware of the coat closet," he said. "And you have 30 years of your family's history to dismantle and rebuild, and that's going to be hard, and it's going to affect both of us." "Yes," he said, "and I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to be right sometimes and wrong sometimes, and I'm not going to stop talking about East African port infrastructure at dinner." "I know," he said. "I've read everything you've given me." "I know you have," she said. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. "Before," he said quietly, so that only she could hear it, "I asked you to be my fiancé because I needed a solution. This time I'm asking because you are the only thing I have found in my life that makes the controlled version feel like a waste." He paused. "And because I love you, and because you are your father's daughter in every way that matters. And he tried to do the right thing in a room full of powerful men, and so do you, every day. And I want to spend my life in the same room as that." Her throat did the thing it did sometimes. She did not fight it this time. "Yes," she said. He put the ring on her finger. Around them the hall moved and buzzed, and someone nearby was crying, which was probably Kofi, though he would deny it, and Madeline was saying something to Grace in the careful Korean-accented English she had been developing over 2 days of kitchen collaboration, and Grace was responding in the warm Swahili-accented English that she used when she was feeling something she wanted to say carefully. Amara looked at her hand. She looked at Jae-hyun. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her on the back steps in the Nairobi rain, with nothing held back. She put her hand against his jaw. Her turn, this time. And he let her, which was the thing she loved most about him, the thing she had never told him directly, that underneath all the precision and the control and the carefully managed distance, he was someone who let her in when it counted. "Come on," she said. "Your grandmother has been standing for 20 minutes, and she won't say so." "I know," he said. "I noticed." "Of course you did," she said. They turned back toward the group, toward Grace and Kofi and Madeline in her navy hat, toward the noise and the ordinary beauty of a day that would not be repeated. The old world that had controlled him was gone. Not cleanly, not completely, because nothing in real life ends completely. There would be review boards and restructuring documents and difficult council meetings for years to come. But the part of it that had run on fear and silence and the suffocation of inconvenient truth was gone. And what was left was smaller and harder and entirely, finally, his own. He had not become a different person. He had become the version of himself that had always been there underneath the walls, waiting for the cost of keeping them up to exceed the cost of taking them down. And the cost of keeping them up had been her. He was not going to calculate that one wrong again. Madeline caught his eye from across the hall and looked at him with the expression of a woman who had paced beside a hallway at 8 years old and never forgotten what it meant to find someone standing on the other side of the door. He gave her a nod. She nodded back. And outside the hall, Seoul went on being what it was. Enormous, layered, indifferent in the way of all great cities, full of people who were also in the middle of the hardest things of their lives, who were also trying to find the version of themselves worth becoming, who are also learning, slowly and at significant cost, that the greatest strength is not the kind that closes people out.